All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brad Williams. I'm going to be your host for the next 3 days. Welcome to Live from Mackinac, sponsored by DTE Energy. It's a beautiful day on Mackinac Island, as it will be for the next 3 days. And we have an exciting programming for you here with DTE Energy's stage on Live from Mackinac. We're going to start it off today with Samantha Schreiber, our first moderator, and she's going to spend some time with our pollster and Michigan's pollster, Richard Schuba. So take it away.
Yes, happy first ever Live from Mackinac. How are you feeling about it, Richard?
Feeling great, and it's a beautiful day again.
So the Glen-Garriff poll just dropped for this conference. For people that haven't seen it yet, what is genuinely surprising you here?
Well, I think, on the policy survey, what's interesting is the degree to which voters are getting very nervous about the economy. 62% of Michigan voters see a weakening economy now. That's up from 55. We asked about the recession. Do you fear a recession in the next year? And that's gone from 27 in January to 38 now. Back in the height of the campaign, that was down at 20%. So we've seen a doubling of fears of recession. And on the question of inflation, do you expect inflation to get better, worse, or stay the same? It's gone from 29 in January to 43 now. Back in the height of the campaign, it was only at 16. So we've seen that triple the fear of inflation, and it's being driven by Democratic voters and independent voters. Republicans think everything's going well with the economy right now. So we're seeing this stark difference on economic views based on, you're viewing the economy based on your party affiliation.
So you would say, just to confirm, Democrats were more comfortable with the economy in 2024 when Biden was in the White House?
Well, they weren't that comfortable with it, actually. What we saw in 2024, yes, Democrats thought the economy was better, Republicans thought it was awful, but by no means the Democratic voters in 24 think the economy was in good shape.
When you think about issues, when you think about voter morale, how are the Michiganders today different from the Michiganders that you polled last spring?
Last spring, well, I don't know that they have shifted in last spring. I think what shifted now is, as we look to the next election, it becomes a referendum on the party in power. And that's just historically speaking. Midterms are going to be a referendum on whoever the president is. And so as we head forward the next 16 months, this is going to become a referendum on Donald Trump.
Do you think 2025, is it the year of the independent collaborator, or is it the year of the partisan firebrand? Because I feel like you're seeing both in Michigan's political space right now.
Well, we've released a horse race survey, a political survey, and I just want to caution, it's very early in this process to be polling. We don't even know the full field. But one of the things we're seeing is that Mayor Duggan is polling at 22%. Of the vote. That's unheard of for an independent in Michigan. We haven't seen that. I mean, I know my history pretty well back to the 1963 Constitutional Convention. We have not seen that here in Michigan. And he is exceptionally strong in Southeast Michigan.
Do you think because of that, are we going to see more independents enter races ahead of the 2026 elections, or are we right now just witnessing a solo Duggan experiment?
I think we're witnessing a solo Duggan experiment right now. I mean, the reality is there are very few political figures in Michigan that come as an independent with what Mike Duggan brings, which is incredible name ID in Southeast Michigan. I mean, he's got 86% name ID down in the Metro Detroit market, compared to only like 30% in outstate. That's his challenge here. But it's also an opportunity for him if he can build his name ID in outstate regions. But this is unique right now to Michigan in terms of we haven't seen this before.
Where did you drive up here from, Richard?
I drove up from St. Joseph.
So did you see the Duggan signs already?
I did.
November 2026 is Independence Day.
Right.
And there's some red and blue ones. What are your thoughts on his ability to run as a general election candidate well ahead of any primaries, well ahead of 2026?
Well, as I said, he's winning the race in Southeast Michigan and Metro Detroit. He's getting kind of clobbered in outstate. So that's his challenge and his opportunity in terms of that. But I think the bigger question becomes, we're 18 months out. as this election gets closer, it becomes more and more a referendum on the president, as any midterm does. So what happens to all these people flirting with an independent candidacy right now? They have a history of simply voting for Democrats and Republicans. Do they revert back to form, or do they actually plunk the lever and vote for the independent?
I want to stretch the frame out a little bit here. When you think about candidates to watch, it can be U.S. Senate, it can be the governor's race, any congressional race. Who are some underdogs that you're a bit intrigued by, beyond just Mike Duggan? Who else is worth watching?
Well, I think, in our numbers in the Senate race, I was very surprised, frankly, to see the strength of Haley Stevens' numbers in the U.S. Senate race. Mike Rogers comes to this with 75, 76% name ID based on last election. He carries it over. Haley Stevens only comes with 43% name ID. And yet, she's doing something in these numbers that allow her to take a lead on him at this stage, both with registered voters by 1 point and with definite voters by 6 points. Those are startling numbers from her.
Do you think Republicans, have they put themselves in a box? Do they have to have Mike Rogers as their U.S. Senate candidate, or is there still room for someone else to get in?
Well, there's clearly room for someone else to get in, but Mike Rogers is the clear favorite in a primary because of his high name ID with Republicans. He's got to get through a primary first. We don't know if he's going to have one. We think Congressman Huizenga might run. But right now, Mike Rogers is the clear advantage there. And, we see the stories that the decks are being kind of cleared for him on that nomination. So I think it'd be very hard for someone to really run an aggressive campaign against him for the nomination.
You did see him perform behind Donald Trump in 2024, though. So does he now become more of a partisan firebrand, or does he try to recreate a moderate formula?
He kind of did the partisan firebrand last election, and yet Elissa Slotkin won that race, very narrowly, mind you. And the one thing we saw in those numbers last election was Mike Rogers closed the gap very quickly because he brought those Republicans home. I would expect him to run the similar race, bring those Republicans home. This election very much is going to hinge on what every election does, which is who actually shows up.
I want to talk about the issues. Okay. Democrats have been very intense on their messaging that targets U.S. House Republicans as Medicaid cutters. A curiosity I have is, can a Medicaid cut do for Democrats what the overturn of Roe v. Wade did for them in 2022?
Listen, the Roe v. Wade overturn was a tsunami. It's something we hadn't seen. In fact, when you look at midterm elections, which the party in power should get routed. History tells us that. Didn't happen in 22 because of Roe v. Wade. The only other time that really didn't happen was in 2002 because of 9/11. So Roe v. Wade being overturned is a very special event. I think what maybe we should be looking at as comparable to this Medicaid issue is what happened in 2018 with the Republican attempt to throw out Obamacare. That health care, that pre-existing conditions issue really played well for Democrats. I think that's what they're angling for, is a similar style of health issue that played for them.
I know I asked you about underdogs to look out for. I kind of want to flip that coin. Who do you think are the most overrated candidates ahead of 2026?
I don't know that I'd call anybody overrated. I mean, the reality is that's for the voters to decide. But I think, in the gubernatorial race right now, we're seeing two clear frontrunners emerging right now in Jocelyn Benson and John James. I think John James has the potential of having a more difficult race, simply because there's more people who might get into that race. And we see, for example, in the poll, the candidate for governor with the highest name ID isn't actually in the race, and that's Tudor Dixon. She had higher name ID than both Jocelyn Benson and John James.
Fascinating.
And part of that is because Democrats and independents have a negative feeling towards her. They're unfavorable, and they remember that.
How do do you think people honestly feel about John James? I mean, you had someone that's already tried to run statewide before twice, was unsuccessful, ran some very competitive, tight U.S. House seats these last 2 years, last 2 cycles. Are they kind of tired of him?
Well, I think that's a question we have amongst the chattering class more than the voters, to be honest. The voters don't view it that way. They remember him. He still has high name ID. He from the races for U.S. Senate. But, I think he's a very formidable candidate. I think we're going to see very close elections in Michigan in 2 years. We have this cross current occurring where typically we change governors every 8 years to a different party. But typically, the second year, the midterm, is against the party in power, which would be the Republicans. We're going to see those two cross currents take place this time. We're not sure which one's going to win out. So I would expect it to be a close election because of those cross currents.
I want to ask about road funding. It is one of the hottest topics, I would dare say the hottest topic in Lansing right now. Does the legislature and the governor, do they really have to do road funding?
Well, there's not a survey I do in which the voters don't say the roads stink. And even with the work that's been done, the roads just are a perennial issue in Michigan. But I will say this, in my 40-some years of polling, I have never done a poll where voters actually support an increase in the gas tax to fix the roads. And this is the challenge of road funding. Everybody says, fix the roads, but the voters aren't willing to expend any resources to fix those roads. And I think one of the challenges policymakers have on this road issue is nobody has thoroughly explained to the voters why the funding doesn't exist. Why is there not enough money to fix the roads? That's one of the things we hear in focus groups, that and the fact that voters all think they're road building experts, which is really funny. But they don't know why there's not money.
So when you ask a voter, why do you think the roads suck, what do they usually tell you?
Oh, we run the gamut. Michigan doesn't know how to do roads. Our winters, heavy trucks. Why aren't we building roads like such and such a state? It's actually pretty funny conversation to listen to because voters are experts on the roads. They're on them every day, and they all have an opinion about how to fix them.
As we kind of approach the end of our conversation here, people at the Mackinac Policy Conference, they're here to have conversations about policy, to have conversations about their future vision for Michigan. Mm-hmm. Based off of the polling you're doing, what do you think should be the top issues on the table right now?
Well, I think the top issue on the table should frankly be bipartisanship. How are we going to cross the aisle? How is each party going to go across that aisle and figure out a way to work with the other side to get something done, rather than just point fingers at each other? We did a poll for the chamber before that asked the question, would you prefer a political leader who negotiates with the other side of the aisle and reaches deals, or would you prefer a political leader who sticks to their party's positions and represents them aggressively? 70-19, they want compromise.
But at the same time, you saw Governor Gretchen Whitmer get a lot of flack when she was negotiating with Donald Trump for the Selfridge deal. Do you think that was just a very, very loud minority?
Yes. That is the 19% on both sides of the aisle. It is the factions, the far right, far left. That is who we hear too much from, and we don't hear enough from the center of the aisle. Elections are decided in the middle in Michigan by independents. That's who we need to pay attention to, and that's why they want compromise.
Now, and I guess, final question, when it comes to Governor Gretchen Whitmer, do you think Michigan's ready to push her over the line when it comes to a presidential bid in 2028, if she chooses to pursue one?
Well, I think that's the bigger question, is does she choose to pursue one? Is this something she wants, she's going to do? You got to make moves early to do that. I don't know if she's doing that.
Is the love there, though? Is the base there?
I can tell you Democrats, particularly in Michigan, love Gretchen Whitmer. Her numbers are genuinely, her job approval amongst Democratic voters is in the mid-90s, which is, rarefied air for any governor. Her job approval has rung anywhere from 50 to 56. steadily since COVID, and it continues that way. She's done very well. She has very strong numbers here in Michigan.
Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate talking to you.
Okay.
All right. Well, Richard, thank you so much. I always learn something every time I talk to you. You're a real expert in your field. And thank you to DTE Energy, who is sponsoring this programming. We can't
check and
tell you
balance
enough,
to kind
how
of protect
valuable
the
this
community.
is, for our
And for me,
members,
that's what I
and
think
the folks
kind
who are
of
streaming at
research
home,
and what I
at
think of
TrainChamber.com.
a role of a
We're gonna move
university.
on
We
to
are
our
there
next
to
segment,
kind of work hand in
to
hand
talk
with
about the state
communities
budget,
to kind of
and the
promote the
conditions
common
that
good.
we're finding ourselves in. I want to introduce to you Jen Flood, the State Budget Director, for a conversation with Samantha.
Director Flood, how are you? Long time no see. I think the last time we talked was after the fiscal year 2025 budget was signed into law.
That's right. Now it's time for the next one.
Okay, so what are your thoughts? The U.S. House Republicans have voted out their Medicaid plan. It's a little bit smaller than what people were projecting initially, but are you still concerned? Are you still sweating a bit?
We're watching with great concern about the discussion in Washington, D.C. As you mentioned, Congress passed a slightly scaled down Medicaid cut plan. We're still tracking that it could mean billions of dollars for the state, and hundreds of thousands of Michiganders would lose access to health care coverage. We're talking about women who are pregnant, children, seniors, people with disabilities, and low-income working Michiganders from the Healthy Michigan program. That's been a huge success for our state. Governor Whitmer worked with then Governor Snyder to get it done in a bipartisan fashion, and so I'm thankful that our U.S. Senators, Slatkins and Peters, will continue to fight to protect the program, and will continue to watch with great interest.
Some people have the question, is there a way that the state can possibly find savings with how it administers Medicaid? Rather that be dealing with pharmaceuticals, rather that be, again, taking a look at these work requirements, these work mandates. What are your thoughts? Is there room for savings here, and what do they look like?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion. I know in Washington, D.C., we've heard the expression waste, fraud, and abuse, and that's how we'll come up with the savings in billions that they're looking for. But I can tell you, we run a really tight ship, and the department is really focused on efficiency and working with the Office of Inspector General, as well as the federal government, to root out any waste, fraud, or abuse. And so when it comes to programs that could be offered, optional services, when people say that, they could be talking about, taking away access to nursing homes or dental benefits. And so none of the decisions are easy, and the $2 billion price tag that we're tracking, that cannot be accomplished via savings or efficiencies.
Now, I know that there is, and I have been talking about GOP1s a lot, and I don't know about you, I'm always seeing HERS ads every time I go on social media. I know Michigan is one of a few states that offers GLP-1 Medicaid coverage for obesity purposes, not just diabetes. Could that be a way to find savings? Look at some of the Medicaid drugs that we cover that not other states are covering.
Yeah, we're always looking at, what's offered to the population that we serve, and we've seen some really great outcomes for people who have access to that medication, just like people do in the commercial insurance world. So, we're always open to the conversation.
Let's talk about road funding. Is a road funding plan from your seat, do the numbers make sense? Is it financially possible?
Yeah, totally. I know we can get it done. The governor put out her plan in February. The fixing the roads has been a priority for the speaker, and I know the Senate gave a nod to it in their budget as well. So we're optimistic. I think that Michiganders deserve answers, and people are looking for leadership from Lansing. So we're ready to get it done.
Is it financially possible, though, without finding new arteries of state revenue, like a vape tax?
Yeah, the governor in her plan called for new revenue to support the roads. We know that we can't cut our way to $3 billion, which is the number that's sort of out there and that we're talking about. And so in the governor's plan, she threw out some suggestions for revenue, including looking at marijuana, including looking at who uses the roads, making sure that we're sending more money to local roads and to transit. She said alongside a revenue conversation, we'd be willing to look at repurposing existing general fund dollars, but that we can't cut our way to get there.
What do you personally think are the least controversial ways to create new revenue?
That's a great question. I think that, the governor put out a mix of options, and there's a lot of different options that have been talked about as we've had this debate over the years. And I think that at the end of the day, Michiganders are looking for leaders to come up with a plan that will invest in our roads.
Do you think the legislature, do you think they're going to get a road funding plan and a state budget done before the end of June?
Let's do it all. Yeah, I'm sure we can get it done.
Would you be willing to bet some money on that, though?
In my personal capacity, sure. We've gotten budgets done by July 1st with Republican legislatures, with Democratic legislatures. Schools, local governments, and higher ed institutions have a July 1st fiscal year kickoff across the state. And so I think we owe it to them to make sure they know the resources they have to work with. And so we made it through the revenue estimating conference a couple weeks ago. Our revenues are stable. Our plan is working. And so we have all that we need to get to the table and get the budget done.
Now, I know one thing that hasn't been done yet is a fiscal year 2024 book closing supplemental. And I know by not getting that done promptly, it can impact the state's credit rating. Am I describing that right? Is that something on your radar at all?
Yeah, we're having conversations with the legislature. There's a deadline for the state budget office to complete the annual comprehensive financial report. And so we got that done a couple weeks ago, and we're looking forward to fiscal year 26 with the legislature now.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to tax credits, there's a lot of tax credit proposals floating right now. There's a child care tax credit proposal, a caregiver tax credit proposal. What are your thoughts on tax credits? Can we sustain them in a year like 2025?
Yeah, going back 2 years ago, passed the largest tax cut in decades for working families and seniors by quintupling the earned income tax credit and repealing the retirement tax. Those are going into, this is the first year that they'll be fully phased in, and we're paying back record amounts to seniors and working families through those tax credits. We also last year passed a bipartisan R&D tax credit. That's all built into the budget, and so we know that those are working. The budget that we put out this year continues those tax credits, but it does not include any new ones.
What is often the state's return on investment when it chooses to go forward with these tax credit proposals?
Yeah, I think the earned income tax credit is such a great example. It was originally a Republican idea to help get low-income families back into the workforce, and it's been a huge success. And so through the quintupling that we passed a few years ago, we've seen more families claim that tax credit at higher dollar amounts, and that means that it's working. Those are dollars that go back into local communities, so they support local restaurants, stores, and the return on investment is great.
Kind of like a halo effect, you would describe it as, a glow.
Absolutely.
And Senate Democrats, in their proposed budget that they voted out earlier this month, they include some relief grants that would go toward businesses and farmers impacted by tariffs. What are your thoughts on that proposal, tariff relief grants?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. One of the things we heard at the revenue estimating conference is that the chaos in Washington, D.C. is causing a lot of uncertainty. And so we're tracking tariffs, trade, and tax policy and monitoring that really closely. And so in the state, we know that our plan is working. Our corporate income tax continues to be strong. Our revenue numbers were adjusted down a little bit from January, but that's because we paid out more than we anticipated in EITC and pension tax refunds. So I would say our economic tools are working. We're watching with great concern, especially the tariffs impacts on the automobile industry and agriculture being two of our top industries in the state. We'll see how that plays out. In terms of the state budget, we're well positioned. We've got a record balance in the rainy day fund. We don't have the long-term resources to fill voids and the gaps that some of the federal policy could create. And so I think we've got to stay focused on what we're doing and what's working and continue to sharpen our economic tools.
Are there any budget gaps, possible budget gaps, that you can confidently, for sure, predict right now? You say we're going to have a gap in this.
Based on the revenue estimating conference, we have the resources that we need to pass a great budget. Continuing the work that we've done in fiscal year 24 and continuing to invest in key things like making sure kids have the tools that they need to learn, that we're growing jobs in local economies, that we're fixing the roads, and there's a lot more work to do on that front. So in this moment, we're really well positioned. And I can say when I talk to my colleagues from across the country, other states are not in that same position. So I think we take that for granted. We have a lot of states that right now are talking about either raising taxes or cutting programs just to maintain current spending. But our revenues are strong and stable, and we're really well positioned.
How do you think other states got into that hole?
You know, some of the challenges that we've heard about are the one-time federal dollars that we all received during COVID. Michigan was really careful about making sure that we spent those one-time dollars on one-time investments. So infrastructure, upgrading our state parks, building a new state psych hospital. We knew those dollars were just coming in one moment of time, and we invested them really responsibly.
The governor has essentially gone on the record that she doesn't have much appetite in signing a temporary budget that would keep government rolling and kind of give the legislature more time to negotiate a budget beyond the end of June. What are your thoughts on that? What could be some of the long-term repercussions of doing a temporary fill-in budget like that the House has proposed?
Yeah, that's how we've seen things operate in Washington, D.C. for a long time. And that's not how we want to do business here in the state.
But what's wrong with doing business like that, though?
I think that we have the resources we need to pass a great budget. And between the executive branch, the state house, and the state senate, at the end of the day, we all care about the same things. We want to invest in our kids. We want to fix the roads. We want to continue to grow jobs in the economy. And so we've got the time to get it done. And I know once we get to the table, we'll be able to come up with a great budget on time.
Do you think the reason why there are so many projected deficits when it comes to road funding on the state level alone, when you talk about MDOT managed highways, is the reason for that, is it because there was never a tax increase approved in the past, a gas tax increase approved?
We've seen decades and decades of disinvestment in our infrastructure. And so, no one created this problem overnight, and it's going to take us a long time to fix it. But between the governor's Rebuilding Michigan program, which I know we all drove past a lot of orange barrels on the drive up, sorry, and you're welcome. Between that, which is leveling off, and the federal resources through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act leveling off, right now we're at a critical moment where we need to come up with a long-term sustainable plan to make sure that we have our roads fixed into the future.
Is there anything that, when you think about the executive budget proposal, for yourself personally, is there anything you really love that you're like, I want to keep this regardless of what happens?
Yes. I'm a mom of 2 young kids, so between access to universal, high-quality pre-K, free school meals, those are 2 things that we passed in a bipartisan manner in the past that I think maintaining will be really important for the future of our kids. But this year, new in the budget, we included the governor's SMART plan for education, which pairs record investment again in K-12 schools, but also make sure that we're doubling down to do better on student outcomes. So we've seen national trends of student test scores headed in the wrong direction, and unfortunately, Michigan is a part of that trend. And so what we've done is set aside resources, including base funding for schools, and tied it to making sure that schools are using evidence-based curriculum to improve outcomes. And for me, that's something that I know Democrats and Republicans care about, that I am really hopeful we can get done this year.
Could you just walk me through real briefly, what do those accountability mechanisms, what do they look like?
Yeah, one of the main things is really helping districts choose from curriculum that's evidence-based. So right now there are so many options out there, and in some districts there's a full-time staffer that's focused on curriculum, and in others it's boards that are trying to navigate what's out there and what works. So we're saying we want to maintain local control, but let's put together a toolbox of options that we know work and that work here in the state and have measurable outcomes to improve test scores.
Do you feel, would you dare say, should teachers and school staff not be getting a raise if the scores aren't going up?
I think we need to do both. We've made huge progress on investing in the per pupil foundation allowance. We closed the gap. I'm hopeful that this year we'll get a final budget that's over $10,000 per pupil. So we need additional resources into the classroom, and also we need to do better. And I'd say teachers have some of the hardest jobs in the state, and so they deserve everything. They're making it more. So I think we can do both.
We are near the end of our conversation. So I just want to ask you real briefly, what are your non-negotiables? As you get ready for the big budget negotiating palooza, what are you not willing to give up on?
I don't think that we're going to get into a tough spot that way. I'd say the governor's first time we passed budgets with an all-Republican legislature, and during that time we increased funding for our classrooms. We created the Reconnect and Achievement Scholarship. We did record investment in roads and bridges, and I know that we're going to continue to do that because at the end of the day, we all care about the same thing.
And what do you have to say goodbye to when you think about something you were able to invest in the past that we can't anymore?
We've done a really good job at investing one-time resources in one-time projects. I think the revenue estimating conference shows that we're sort of at a return to normal and making sure that we're doubling down on the fundamentals. So I think that you'll see a lot of them in the budget this year.
Thank you so much, Director Flood. I really appreciate you coming on for the first ever Live on Mackinac. It was fun.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Flood, and thank you to you for watching this programming. I want to congratulate Director Flood on saying quintuple that many times without getting tongue-tied. Not one of the easiest words to get out of your mouth, and I think she did it probably 5 or 6 times. I want to tell you a little bit about this programming that we've been able to provide you with the support of DTE Energy. Here at the Chamber, as well as at DTE, we wanted to expand this conversation that we're having here on Mackinac Island to include a diverse set of public officials and to be able to give our talented in-state media like Samantha Schreiber from MERS News Service the opportunity to participate in this conference as well. So we are thrilled to be able to provide this programming to you. Just a brief preview of what we have coming up. We have invited all 4 members of the legislature's quadrant, which is the leaders of the House and Republican Senate and the House and Republican Democrats, to have a conversation here about their caucus priorities. And we're going to start the first one of those programs right now with Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks from Grand Rapids and Senator Kevin Hertel from St. Clair Shores, with Samantha talking about Senate Democrats' priorities. So take it away.
Yes, hello. So I am actually the state Senate reporter for MERS News. So you all, unfortunately or fortunately, have to deal with me quite a bit. Sure. Senate Majority Leader Brinks, I have a question I've been dying to ask you. You kicked off this year doing something really bold. You filed a lawsuit against Republican House Speaker Matt Hall. Mm-hmm. Do you have any regrets when you think about just how dysfunctional that relationship is now perceived in the public eye?
No, I don't think that we should have regrets about asking the Speaker of the House to follow the Constitution. So, the substance of what we were trying to get done is still valid. And I would think that as adults in the legislature that we would be able to find ways to work together. There certainly are plenty of common issues that we have an obligation to solve on behalf of the people of Michigan. As the governor has mentioned, she was sued so many times by folks of the opposite party in her first term, yet she managed to find productive ways to get things done. I worked for many, many years in the minority, getting things done with the majority party. I know it's possible. I'd just like to see that happen.
So what you're saying is that a Lansing lawsuit is just a natural thing?
Lansing lawsuits are not that unusual. I would certainly like to not have had to bring that lawsuit, but again, the Constitution is important and we need to follow it.
This is a question I'll have for both of you. Do you all feel like Lansing is genuinely dysfunctional right now?
Look, I served 6 years in the minority, and so sometimes you have to find ways to get around the noise and all of, I think the issue you just talked about. Things like that are necessary at times, and you have to put those issues aside in order to do the work of the people. And so we can do both things, right? We can deal with the issues where we have differences and there's contention, but also focus on the issues that we need to find solutions to. And so with a leader like Leader Brinks, I think you've seen somebody who's willing to sit down and solve really tough issues, but that takes 2 people. That takes people willing to work together. We have to be able to do that.
House Republicans have a road funding plan. The governor has a road funding plan. Are we going to see a Senate Dems road funding plan anytime soon?
We've had lots and lots of really productive conversation. We're trying to put the pieces together that will create a plan that could actually get through the legislature. It's not enough just to have a plan. And it's not enough to even pass things through one chamber. If it's not bipartisan and bicameral, it will not be successful. So what we're lacking here is a genuine conversation between the House and the Senate, and that needs to happen in earnest if we are going to get to a solution. It also needs to move alongside the budget because the budget implications are so significant. And so until we have productive conversations about both those things, it doesn't matter if there's a plan on the table if it never materializes.
Do you think road funding can be done without creating new arteries for state revenue?
I think the governor was accurate in saying that it's going to be really difficult. She may even have been stronger, saying it should involve both revenue increases as well as tightening our belt and finding savings or cuts in the budget. I think that's most likely accurate in order for it to be successful without cutting things that folks in Michigan, frankly, really rely on. So
Senator Hertel, I have to ask you this. I saw you getting very, very fired up about Public Act 51 during the road funding conversation. Where are your thoughts right now when it comes to that?
You know, this has been an issue that I've worked on my entire time in the legislature. Back when I was in the House, in a bipartisan way, legislators from Macomb County came together, and we were very honest about the fact that we think we need to see changes to how that formula works. And so for me, that's a really important part of the conversation. I think we should make sure we have a formula that is functional, that helps the areas of the state that need it, if we're going to put more money towards roads in the state.
One of your big proposals right now for Senate Dems is the child care tax credit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we announced it earlier this year. We've introduced the bills now, and we hope to get them moved and over to the House. You know, as a parent who has a child who will finish daycare or preschool in the fall here, I know exactly what it's like to have those bills and the challenges that it creates for young families across our state. The challenges to buying a house and to be able to afford just the basics to put food on the table. So I think it's incredibly important, and it goes along with the lines of how we've looked at how do we create tax relief for the people who actually need it across our state. We did that last session. I think we can continue to do that this session with these child tax credits.
And who are the families that qualify?
Well, so there's an income threshold in the bill. I believe it's up to about $120,000 a year. Don't quote me on that. I'll go back and check it. We did change it to make sure more families qualify across the state. But I do think we have to have this conversation through the committee process and with the House, because they have a version as well that they talked about. Which I think is a good thing, right? I think we all recognize that there are families across our state that are challenged with these expenses, and we should find ways to help them. It is extremely expensive to raise a child. $20,000 in the first year of a child's life. That is a hit to any family, and we want people to be able to do that, start a family, grow here in the state of Michigan, stay here in the state of Michigan, be able to afford to do it.
So I get when I ask questions like this, a lot of people answer, why can't we just have both, right? What would you prefer, though? Would you rather go all in on something for accessible childcare, or would you rather get this roads fund deal done?
That's a false choice, I would say. And I would also say that, I thought you said, why can't we have both? I thought you were maybe going to go the direction of finding more ways to support families, and I think that is what we proposed with the building blocks package of bills about supporting new families with a new baby, making sure that at that moment where you experience maximum economic insecurity as a family, that the support is around that young family welcoming a new baby into their household. But we also have bills that would, as part of the package with the child credit, support new moms with RX Kids, so that first year that provides key support there. We also have cutting red tape for daycares. We have bills that would help expand the TRISHARE program that employers and employees and government work together to tackle the child care crisis. So all of that should go together.
One of the big components of the budget you all have voted out is tariff relief for businesses, for farmers. Why? Is that something that you're very, very, very fired up about, and why so?
Yeah, the chaos out of Washington, D.C., the tariffs are just the main front stage kind of example of the impact that can have on Michigan. Autos, ag, even the price of lumber impacting housing. Those are all big, big issues for us in Michigan and can cause incredible harm. And we haven't even talked about the impact on actual households when you talk about all of the basic daily things that you have in your life, that prices are going up, in some cases, over doubling. So it's incredibly important that we have a plan and that we are presenting a steady, stable budget in a consistent way. And that includes the timing of moving that budget, by the way, but so that families know that they can count on us to support them when they need it. We can't predict the future, obviously, but we need to do as much as we can to make sure that we are there for our Michiganders.
Senator Brinks, will this be the year that your dreams come true and we get Prescription Drug Affordability Board done?
I would love to say yes. It's one of those things that is important to every family. We know that people are very, very concerned about the cost of their medications. We know that people depend on them. People with chronic conditions pay some of the highest prices and some of the largest amounts of their budget for prescription medications, and those are the things that are able to keep them working, keep them going to school. So chronic illnesses in particular are things that are debilitating when it comes to productive behavior.
Senator Hertel, you're in one of the most competitive battleground districts in our state, and I've seen you go all in on PDAB. Why did you choose to do that? You're doing town halls, you're doing press releases on it.
Well, you live in the district, so you know it very well. One of the most aging populations in the state, as well as middle-aged and young people that also are faced with high prescription drug costs. This cost hits everybody across the board. And we did a town hall just a couple months ago where I think we had over 80 people in the room. You were there as well, I believe. And you heard the stories from people about how this is impacting them. Seniors who are cutting pills in half simply because they can't afford the full course of their medication. It's not good for their health. It's not good for our economy here in the state of Michigan. It's hurting people, and we need to make sure we're doing everything we can here as a state to fix it.
What are your policy goals before people leave for summer recess in Lansing? What are the top things that you really want to get done beyond just the budget?
Right. Obviously, the budget is job one at this point, but anything we can do to lower costs. So PDAB is one of those things. Working on a couple of other bills in terms of housing. We've already passed a number of things supporting young families with the maternal and child health care package, Momnibus. We've got, help me out here, Kevin, we've got
criminal sexual assault statute
we just
limitations that went over to the House that are incredibly important for many people here in the state.
And of course, FOIA. No list from the Senate Democrats would be complete without talking about FOIA. Transparency has been a hot topic in both chambers. Really, FOIA is the gold standard. There's no reason we can't join the rest of the nation with more transparency about what happens under the dome in Lansing.
Well, what are you, I think as we kind of approach the end of our conversation, now that we enter the heat of budget negotiations, what are your non-negotiables? So what are you willing to fight to the death for?
I think, when we talk about road funding in particular, fitting that into the budget is a huge task, and we are more than willing to have that conversation. But we will not be able to fund roads at the expense of things like education. We've worked incredibly hard. I think that you will hear as a theme throughout the week this week from business leaders as well as educators and nonprofit community that education is incredibly important. So if we intend to fund roads, we can't do it by hurting education. We can't do it by taking away critical services that are things that people depend upon, whether that's for housing or human services kinds of things. So those are some of our hard lines in the sand. It can be bipartisan. It must be bipartisan. And I think that I'm optimistic that it's possible to get there. What we need are willing partners to sit down and really negotiate those difficult things.
Do you have any non-negotiables, Senator Hertel?
I really am focused on getting the budget done. I've heard from school districts across my district and across the state that it is critically important to them. I have school board members that are worried about passing their budget. That really does impact so many folks on the ground, including teachers all across the state. I think it's only fair that we tell them exactly what they're going to have to work with in the next year. We've been able to do that for many years now. I'm hopeful we can do that again.
Senator Hertel, Senate Majority Leader Brinks, thank you so much for our first ever Live on Mackinac.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you both, and thank you, Samantha, for helping lead this first group of conversations. This is live from Mackinac, and we're sponsored by DTE Energy. I want to congratulate myself for not turning this into a Saturday Night Live joke yet, but I can't promise between now and Thursday that won't happen. We have a number of dignitaries who are here in the Grand Hotel Parlor. We see them walking by from minute to minute for those of you who are joining us as a streaming audience. Everyone is enjoying a lovely day here on Mackinac Island. The sun is shining, and we are definitely hoping to avoid the rain, and it's looking positive. So this is your live from Mackinac weather report. We are going to make a transition here in a moment as everyone switches microphones. Samantha, who did an excellent job moderating this first group of sessions, is going to be replaced by Rick Pluta from Michigan Public Radio. And Rick's going to be here for the next 3 sessions as we talk about important policy discussions such as tax policy, regulatory reform, as well as the importance of the defense industry in Michigan. We all saw just a few weeks ago that President Trump came into Michigan and committed to putting a new deployment into the Selfridge Air Force Base in Macomb County. What a huge win for us here in Michigan. We're all very excited, and we know what a vital part the defense industry plays in our state's economy. So an exciting win here. Also later today, we're going to have members of Michigan's Auto Caucus talking about the importance of the auto industry, which we all understand as Michiganders. The Michigan Auto Caucus is a program of MichAuto, the state's automotive cluster association, which is housed here at the Detroit Regional Chamber. And so we've got a couple of our leaders from the Michigan Auto Caucus, the Legislative Auto Caucus, who are going to be joining us later this afternoon. Of course, we heard from Senator Brinks and Senator Hertel representing the Senate Democratic Caucus. Our next caucus coming up here in a few minutes is going to be the Senate Republican Caucus. Senator Jim Runstad and Senator Roger Victory are going to be leading that conversation. As most of you probably know, beyond being a member of the Michigan Senate, Senator Runstad is also the newly elected chair of the Michigan Republican Party. So we'll get to hear from him the future of the party as well as the priorities of the Senate Republican Caucus. And then we're looking forward to conversations tomorrow with Ranjit Puri, the leader of the House Democratic Caucus. He will be here with Representative Stephanie Young from Detroit. And then tomorrow afternoon, we're also going to have the House Republican Caucus. Representative Brian Posthumus is going to be leading that conversation. So this is going to be a full week of programming, not just on the Mackinac main stage, but here for you, presented by DTE Energy. We're going to have important policy conversations. Of course, you can stream all of this. You've obviously found this program on DetroitChamber.com, but all of our main stage sessions here at the Mackinac Policy Conference will be streamed also on DetroitChamber.com and on Detroit PBS, hosted by our friend Zoe Clark. So it's going to be an exciting week here at Mackinac Island. As long as we can keep the weather exactly how it's supposed to be, we'll all be successful. In addition to this programming right now, we have a golf outing going on with members of the Chamber who are out enjoying the Gem, which is Mackinac Grand Hotel's excellent 9-hole golf course. And then later tonight, we'll be having a celebrity dinner with our friend Mike Tirico from NBC Sports, who's also an Ann Arbor resident. And we have our very special guest, which I'm particularly excited to see and meet, Jared Goff. I might start the Jared Goff chant down in the tent later. We'll see if I can get away with that level of disruption. Here in just a moment, we're going to have a conversation about tax policy with Representative Jason Hoskins, who is an excellent state representative from Southfield, serving his second term, and Senator Mark Huizenga from the west side of the state, another excellent member of the Senate. Most of these programs you'll see from here on out will have a Democratic member and a Republican member of the legislature to engage in this conversation. So one of the dignitaries who is in this room, besides Wayne County Executive Warren Evans, Senator Slotkin, who I've seen walk by, one of the dignitaries is Rick Pluta from Michigan Public Radio, who is going to be our Sherpa for the next 3 sessions. So Rick, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thanks, Brad. So for our first session, East meets West, Democrat meets Republican, House meets Senate, and we are talking tax policy from the Senate, Republican of Zealand, more or less.
Walker.
Walker.
Grand Rapids area.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know Grand Rapids area.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Senator Mark Huizenga and Representative from Southfield, Brad Hoskins. So,
I got a new name there.
what did I say? Jason Hoskins. I'm sorry. All right. I'm going to try and catch up to competence.
Okay.
So, we're here to talk about tax policy. There are some differences, some more existential than others, between Democrats and Republicans, between the House and the Senate. And I guess I'd like to start talking about how the revenue picture may be tempering ambitions in terms of revenue, I guess more or less on the Democratic side, and tax cuts, which I know Republicans would like to see, especially on the income tax. Senator, I would like to start with you. Is there room for an income tax reduction, considering the reduction in revenue that we are seeing according to the latest projections?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that when we look at taxes, especially hardworking Michiganders, they're all looking for relief. And finding ways to cut taxes for them is important. It's what I hear every day. It's a kitchen table issue. How do we put food on our table? And anything we can do to close that gap for them is valuable. And of course, you could argue that we need more money in the state. However, we've seen our state budget balloon by something like 40% in the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay, well, we know on the federal side that we've got people having concerns about, for example, Medicaid. Name one place that you would look to roll back spending in order to fund an income tax reduction.
Sure, I think there's a lot of opportunities for efficiency, especially when you look at our budgets. Let's take housing, for example. That's one of the main issues we hear all the time. We can't afford housing. Yet we have several departments that kind of dabble in this. We've got the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. They do a great job of it, but we also see things in DHHS, we see things in MEDC, and I think if we focused on that and let those people operate more efficiently and stay in their lane and focus on what they're tasked to do, I think we'd see efficiencies there.
Is there a particular program that you would look at? Just one place, for example.
Yeah, I don't see anything in general, like specific, like here's the cut I would make, but what I would say is that we do need to see efficiencies in our government. I mean, let's look at it from a very simple perspective. We've seen the number of people that work for state government continue to grow over the last 4 or 5 years with stagnant population. Why is it we need all these more people with additional expenses with poor performance?
Okay. Representative, I want to turn to you. So do you think that there is room, considering where things stand, for the state to find more revenue?
Yeah, I think that we can, just like Senator Huizenga said, there's always room for efficiencies, and I'm always looking for ways to make sure we're putting money back into Michiganders' pockets. But I also want to make sure that we are running government in an efficient way as possible and with the resources that we need. And I want to make sure that we are definitely doing everything we can to make, if we have to, targeted cuts. But if we have to also look at raising that revenue, I want to make sure we're doing that too, and doing that in the most responsible way as possible.
Where would you go for revenue?
There's a number of ways that we can do it. I mean, we were looking, even last term, we were looking at ways that we could possibly bring more revenue into the state. And there's a number of proposals that I've heard throughout, even as we were having the discussion about road funding. There are a number of proposals I was hearing about, pot for potholes, for example, and other fees, and maybe other ways that we can raise more revenue. But I mean, I'm willing to have that thoughtful conversation about how we can do that and what are the best ways that I think we all can get agreement on.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, Senator, that there is room for the income tax rollback that Republicans have called for?
Yeah, I think there is, because when that proposal was put forth, it said basically if state government grows to a certain level, then we're going to cap that. And instead to say we're going to not cap that basically means we want bigger government and more government. I think we have to look at the long-term consequences of this, because when we see our stagnant population in the state of Michigan, we just have to ask ourselves, are we creating a better environment for us to have business, a better place for us to work, or making it more complicated and more expensive? And it's a very delicate balance, and we have to have the safety net for people that have needs, but we also have to make sure that it's an attractive place to do business and to live and work.
So, again, but revenue is also a part of quality of life for the state in its entirety, the safety net that you're talking about, and also at the community level. How do you do reductions from anywhere and still maintain the quality of life that we're talking about that's a part of government services?
Yeah, I think if you look at the situation, even with the road funding program,
which we're going to get to.
For the last couple of years, and this is related to taxes, for the last several years, we've bonded for the roads. And when you bond, that's basically nothing more than a credit card. Now, let's say you buy a refrigerator and it's going to last for 15 years. If you choose to put that on a credit card, you certainly may, but you're going to pay a lot more dollars over time with that. The issue is that now the interest on that this year is something like $331 million. That means that money can't go to fixing roads, and then on top of that, $50 million comes off the top of Act 51, which means we don't have funding $50 million less for both our counties and our local roads. It's a circular problem. I mean, it's self-defeating, and so when we talk about efficiencies, we need to be smart with the hardworking taxpayer dollars. And this was not a good move. I mean, if we use the example of the refrigerator, if you pay that off over 15 years, it's done. We're doing the same thing with our bonds for the roads. It's going to last for 20 years, and now after 20 years, what are you going to do? The roads have to be rebuilt. Are you going to bond them again for excess cost? We need to see more efficiencies and match revenues with expenses.
Okay, but Senator, you opened the door. What about revenue for roads? I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't think that there doesn't have to be more money, substantial more money coming in, and that's not going to be just efficiencies.
Right. Well, I think it's fair to say that we want to make sure that all the money at the pump goes to the roads. There's an issue, though, because some of the money at the pump goes to education. We've got to find ways to fill that gap. I think the House plan moves in the right direction. We haven't seen a plan in the Senate yet, so I don't know what exactly those specifics are. But I will say this, the people, when they put dollars in the pump, they want to make sure that those dollars are going to fix the roads, and we haven't been doing that. We haven't been doing that for a long time, and this is one of those chronic issues that we probably need to fix because it's just not sustainable. Even if you put on top of that inflation in general, we'll see increased taxes come in with increased sales taxes, of course, because things cost more. But the flip side of that is then, of course, the roads cost more to fix as well. So we're really at this catch-22 position right now.
Representative Hoskins, is there room, you said you're open to efficiencies,
Sure.
but is there a space for Democrats to basically agree to some partial reduction in the income tax rate like Republicans are insisting upon?
I think all options can be on the table. I think that we see when we're talking about the roads, for example, I think that this is something that every Michigander, I know most people in the legislature want to tackle. And I think from the Democratic caucus's perspective, we are certainly open to anything that's able to be able to get us to that goal. I will say that it's going to be incredibly difficult to just cut our way to getting to that goal. Like, I think there will have to be a conversation about raising revenue. What that looks like, though, I don't know. I've left, there are other people who are having those conversations, and I'm sure we'll get to a place that hopefully we can all agree. But I do think that, yes, there can be that conversation, potentially. I don't know how far it'll go, but I know we will definitely have that conversation about it. As we've had, certainly this term, we've had that conversation, as well as last term we were having that conversation as well.
Okay.
Rick, a lot of times we talk about issues in the legislature. The best ones are the ones that aren't partisan. And it's pretty universal that we all want to see our roads fixed. How we get there is yet to be determined. I would still say that we're at an early stage in the budget this year, and I'm hopeful that we can find ways to do that, to find reductions, and to find ways to fund the roads finally.
When we look at what I don't think anyone would argue that Washington is not dysfunctional right now. When we look at the budget debates that are happening there, Medicaid keeps coming up as one of the places where government would have to look at to cut, and states seem to be a place where that's looking at. Michigan is a Medicaid expansion state as well. How concerned, this is to each of you, but Senator, I'll start with you. How concerned are you that Medicaid funding, which would affect a district like yours quite a bit, would be on the table as part of a federal budget resolution?
Yeah, everything that I've read so far about the budget in Congress is that they want to make sure that the Medicaid doesn't grow at an expanded rate. And so looking at ways to reduce this over time, so it's a 10-year plan. A lot of times people talk about cuts and they say, well, what is this going to mean to Michigan? I've heard the worst case scenario of Medicaid's going to go to zero. I don't think that anyone is suggesting that at all, whether it's in Congress. And I think the reality is that's not what that plan is designed for. It's designed to be a safety net to make sure people have health care coverage, and there should be a return on investment for us because the hospitals, they can't afford to do this, and it's going to be balanced back right on the state government. So having that safety net's important, but there's probably ways to see efficiencies. I mean, one of the ideas of work requirements, especially when you have tight labor right now, is one of those issues that they talk about at the federal level. And I would support that if a person's willing and able to work, that would probably be a good solution.
Do you think that would raise a lot of revenue to fill that gap?
I'm not sure it would raise revenue, but it might make people feel like they have a more sense of purpose, and maybe they find different tools and skills to get them back into the workplace. And if you're able-bodied, and you should, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, but we have trouble getting people into training programs right now when jobs are plentiful and employers are looking.
Yeah, I think if you look at a lot of the trades programs, if you talk to people at Michigan Works or the Reconnect program and the trade schools that are going on, especially the community colleges, I've heard in my district especially that lots of people are learning about new skills, whether it's welding or auto body repair or automotive repair, engines as well. And I know that the colleges have seen an uptick, especially since we've grown that program and made it more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Representative, I've picked on the senator quite a bit. So,
he could take it. It's okay. Like, if you want to do some more, go ahead. Like,
how do Democrats go about selling a revenue hike when it looks like the employment picture and the economy, at the very least, seems to be flattening?
And I think that's where we have to be very thoughtful about what we do and how we are funding government and what the services that we are providing. You know, I think there's a concern or there's an idea that government doesn't work efficiently, government isn't providing certain services, and so why would I want to pay more for services that may or may not be being provided well for us? And I think it is up to us to really go out and say that we do need this revenue simply because for these services, because these services are things that many people in the state depend on. You know, I am very concerned, as we're just having the conversation on Medicaid, I am very concerned, certainly in my district, about what cuts could do to access of care. Hospitals are my biggest employers, and there's definitely concern about what that could, the impact that could have on the hospitals in my district, and them being able to provide the services necessary for constituents. So I know the cuts, hopefully that at the federal level, those cuts will be reassessed because any cuts to Medicaid could be harmful to my constituents as well as the state as a whole.
With reduced employment, which we've seen in the last few monthly reports, I think the last 3, revenue flattening, is the state in a position to ask taxpayers for more?
You know, this is going to be a question.
As Republicans are asking for less.
Yeah, you know, this is something that we are definitely going to have to take a look at and see if this is something that we can really provide, and really go out to voters and constituents and ask, like, again, are these services that are something that you really need? Are these things that are working well? You know, we in the beginning we were having a conversation about efficiencies in government and how government can work well. And I think when you make the case that these services are vital, people will be willing to pay for them. But it's really going out and making sure that we're doing those things well. And then I think once you do that, you'll be able to have that conversation about raising revenue.
Is there the will in the legislature for the sort of business attraction incentives that the Whitmer administration is talking about?
You know, I think that as somebody who worked very hard 2 years ago, or last term, I was the chair of the Economic Development and Small Business Committee in the House. And, you know, those tools were some of the things that we were able to get through. A lot of them were things we're able to get through on a bipartisan basis. And I think there is a conversation around how we can, among other things, incentivize businesses to come here, what that looks like. It might have to be a little bit different, especially in this environment. I don't know what the appetite is on both sides of the aisle, but there's a lot of things that we can do beyond incentivizing businesses. Again,
which I'm just jumping that yes, they were adopted with bipartisan support. They were also opposed with bipartisan opposition.
But it got through. That's the only, that's what matters, right? They were able to get through because I think on both sides of the aisle, we saw the value of having certain tools at our disposal to be able to compete with other states in the country. I mean, other states, they have tools just like we do on incentivizing a business to come to their area. Some of them have other things that they're able to do. You go to, somewhere in the South like Tennessee or Mississippi, they had things in place for site readiness that we don't have here in Michigan. The permitting process was a little bit more streamlined. There are things that we can do here in addition to incentivizing incentives that can make Michigan a more attractive place for business to come and stay.
Senator, on incentives, is there the appetite to move the governor's package through the legislature?
I would just say again that I truly agree with Rep. Hoskins on this one, that we need to make government more efficient. We know that there are lots of process problems with efficiency, getting a permit, and when you're an outstate person looking to come to Michigan, we don't check the box in a few of those areas, and we need to do a more and better job. I think sometimes we're purely focused on getting the job instead of creating a landing zone that says we're open for business. And I think, frankly, when we talk about taxes and increasing taxes for the people of the state of Michigan, if I'm a business owner and coming to the state of Michigan, I would see that as the negative. So that's another one of those balances that we have to have. I like incentives. I like what the MEDC does, and in many ways, but I would actually focus more on creating site readiness facilities, that places that people can come in, have a landing zone that says we've got our gas, our electric, our energy, all these things ready to go here. Just a cornfield is not ready for development. So creating the infrastructure to give them a place to come in and land that says Michigan's open for business is probably a good policy. When I was mayor of the city of Walker, that's exactly what we did, and we brought in thousands of jobs.
And that's part of the incentive process, too, that kind of is not talked about, or certainly wasn't talked about a lot last term and not talked about that much this term, is that when we're incentivizing businesses, that is a part of it, the site readiness portion. It's just, I think we can do it a lot better. I think maybe we can focus on specifically site readiness as we're talking about bringing businesses here.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it's people keep saying that gardening, versus incentives, but in the end, a lot of companies, big employers that act as lures for smaller employers surrounding them, at some point, they want the government, the state, the local governments both to write a check. Should that be a non-starter?
Well, I think it's a two-part answer there, really. One, most jobs come from small businesses, and creating a climate that says we're open for small businesses to start up here and to be successful, that's actually where most jobs come from. It's great to have the big employers come to town, and that's part of it, but it's a healthy balance between both of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would agree with that, too. We want to make sure Michigan is a vibrant and livable place that you want to have your business come to, you want to have your business stay. And we also, there's a huge conversation around talent, attracting and retaining talent here to the state. And we want to make sure we have the things in place, the tools in place to be able to attract that, a great education system. I can't tell you how often, at least in my neck of the woods, I heard about public transit and some kind of transit system here in the state. But also all those other things that make make anyone want to stay in the area. And I think we can agree that like housing being that number one thing, affordable and attainable housing is something that we need to work on.
Which we should talk about, but it's not going to be here. Representative Jason Hoskins, Democrat of Southfield, Senator, I'm getting it right, Senator Mark Huizenga, Republican of Walker. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your perspectives.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, it's okay, Rick. I'm quick to forget your name, too. So thank you,
I know.
Representative Hoskins, Senator Huizenga, for your participation today. As you know, this is a policy conference here at the Detroit Regional Chamber Mackinac Policy Conference, but that doesn't mean that that's the only thing people are focused on. The fashion here at the Mackinac Policy Conference is something to behold. Madras jackets, all shades of pink. You may notice behind me that the Grand Hotel Parlor has been repainted a lovely shade of salmon, I guess I would call it, for this conference. Rick, could I talk to you for a minute?
Sure.
While we're waiting for our next panel. How many Mackinac Policy Conferences have you attended?
Oh, goodness. It's got to be in the 30s.
And what makes this attractive to members of the media to want to participate here?
Basically, the state capital and a lot of county and local governments move up here where everybody sort of gets into a room onto the island and starts talking deals. And I guess the other thing, too, is everyone is up here doing that. There's the back-to-back press conferences, but there's also, just with the cluster of people, the access that you bump into people on the porch and on the street that downstate you make phone calls to try and make an appointment with.
And how does someone like you prepare to come up here? Because it seems like you never know what the story is going to be to come out of this conference.
You leave yourself a lot. You do a lot of planning and leave yourself a lot of flexibility. Certainly, there are weeks before the conference begins. The story pitches start coming into my inbox and other journalists' inbox, and that's political journalists, business journalists, people who cover the not-for-profit sector, specific healthcare sectors, for example. And so you kind of look at what you'd like to do, what you can do, and then sort of balance the two very often, making on-the-fly decisions, once you're on the island.
And here at Grand Hotel, we have a specific media center for you and your colleagues to hang out. Mm-hmm. I'm told that the food is fantastic in the media center. How would you grade it?
It is first rate, but I have yet to see it this year. So, Mackinac this year, TBD.
I'll tell you what, the staff food has been great from our partners here at Grand Hotel. Mm-hmm. So I'm certain the media center will be.
I think the media accommodations and the staff accommodations are pretty similar.
Good. Well, I'm going to step back here and get you prepared for our next panel. As I mentioned earlier, the defense industry is critical to Michigan and our economic success. So we have two members of the legislature, two members of the Senate who are going to talk about that along with Rick. So I want to welcome back Senator Kevin Hertel and his colleague, Senator Mike Weber from Oakland County, and district includes Macomb County as well. So Rick, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. This session, all Southeast, all Senate, so makes my life a little easier.
For you.
Yeah. So I want to start, I guess, with talking about the new mission that's been approved for Selfridge, which was a deal long time in the coming. It sort of anchors Michigan's defense industries, that this has been talked about as the start of maybe something bigger and better. So from that, what's next?
Well, this is something we've been working on for a while now in the legislature. The governor made a commitment of $100 million to upgrade the runway at Selfridge, to fix an issue with the
Made a trip to the White House, too.
She did as well. Her advocacy has been great, and the advocacy of the speaker as well. This has been a bipartisan project, and we've put $54 million in this. If the Senate version of the budget were to pass, that would be $54 million over the last 4 years in investments at Selfridge. So this didn't just happen overnight. This is something we've been working on and trying to attract for a long time. And I'll tell you, I was at a Memorial Day ceremony with an A-10 flyover yesterday. And I joked that when those F-15EXs come, that flyover is going to be a lot louder. But we're really proud in Macomb County to have been able to attract this mission that is so critical, not only to our region, the entire state of Michigan, almost $1 billion economic activity every single year because of Selfridge, employs thousands of Michiganders, and it's critically important to the entire state.
All right, there are contractors, small businesses that serve that facility and well. But I guess I'll pose the same question to you, Senator. Okay, so you've done this, congratulations, but what's next?
Well, as you know, we do have the aerospace and the bipartisan bicameral Aerospace and Defense Caucus. I know Senator Hertel is a vital part of that as well. I co-chair it along with Representative Donovan McKinney, and we took it over from Senator McDonald and then former Speaker Joe Tate, who kind of got it started a few sessions ago, and it's really been great. It's one of the best in terms of the size of the caucus. We've got a lot of power in terms of about 50 members as part of it. And we've been obviously working with Senator Hertel and others on the runway project, but then we're now also really monitoring, and it's a big part as we're following the federal budget in terms of the ground vehicles and what that potentially means with our jobs and our investment at TACOM as the Army is talking about moving away from the ground vehicles. Not only does that affect our prime jobs, but also affects some of our military jobs in Macomb County and throughout the region. And so we're going to try to, the best we can, we're going to try to advocate to try to keep as much as we can while we maybe transition. Some of those companies are able to have the time to transition into other things. As you know,
transition from ground vehicles?
From some of the ground vehicle stuff. I think there'll always be a role for ground vehicles, to be honest.
What kind of ground vehicles are we talking about?
We're talking about like unmanned tanks. We're talking about, you should really, and I think, I know Senator Hertel was part of our TACOM tour in January. A lot of very creative, innovative stuff that we're doing there. But of course, auto capital of the world, we are the ones that, really have the innovation as it comes to the ground vehicle stuff. And they want to move away from that. They want to move to drones and stuff like that. We're kind of on that as well. We had that unmanned crew challenge, recently on the drone thing, and so we worry about that as well. But we got to try to build on the success of getting Selfridge.
On the job training side, what do we need to be doing as far as skill sets to create a workforce that's going to attract more of this type of defense spending?
The area of learning in STEM and technology learning is incredibly important. If you go to Starbase, actually, on Selfridge Air National Guard base, it is an incredible program that gets young students out of the classroom and into an environment where they can do hands-on learning. That is, you hear from business leaders across every sector, I think, in the state of Michigan, but we need to get into more advanced manufacturing, more engineering here in the state. The work that's happening over at TACOM with the ground vehicles and turning those into some autonomous vehicles and upgrading technology is huge and could be a huge growth potential here in the state of Michigan. We have to be able to have the workforce in order to do it. And we're watching other states, and I think this is why the Chamber has been so focused on the defense sector. We're watching other states compete for the exact same business, and in some cases, they're winning. And we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to have a talented workforce and keep those people here in the state.
Okay, you've made the case that we ought to do it. What ought we do?
Well, right now we are doing a lot. It's the fourth largest industry in the state of Michigan. It's a $31 billion industry for Michigan. It's thousands of jobs, particularly in Southeast, but also on the west side of the state with some of the emerging drone companies that are coming online. I think it's really, it kind of, if you build it, they will come. You've got you've got a great base there. We're trying to, as a caucus, keep and build what we have. But then also, it's a talent thing, and I know Rep. McKinney, if he was here, would really talk about that piece of it better than I can. But we're really trying to make sure that the folks that are coming out of our universities, instead of going out to work for Boeing in Seattle, that they're staying here in the state of Michigan. So we've looked at different things like an R&D tax credit specifically for the aerospace and defense industry. We've looked at kind of aircraft type of legislation, aircraft parts that actually Rep. Frisbee and Rep. Andrews have bills that passed the House Finance Committee that are moving through the process in a bipartisan fashion. So there's some different things we can do, even within the budget process, working with our Office of Defense and Aerospace Innovation. They've been doing a great job. Colonel Gutierrez came in around this time last year, and he's really only been on the ground here in Michigan for a year, and we've already seen results. So working with our existing companies and then working with ODE and MEDC to try to attract some of these new companies.
Well, what if you could just check off one box? What's one thing you could do, if you could wish for anything, that you think would be a big step towards getting an expansion of this kind of industry, building on this opportunity?
I think we've got to get young people that are here in the state of Michigan today excited about this kind of work. I think a lot of them don't understand what's happening right in their own backyard and the growth potential for what's happening in areas like Macomb County and Oakland County and across the state. And working while we have to protect those assets, we need to grow them as well. Getting young people interested and into that field is going to be a huge part of it, as well as the Michigan Reconnect program, which has helped get a lot of older people connected into these fields as well and help them get the training that they need. We have money in the military affairs budget this year that will help connect veterans with job opportunities right in their own community and get the training that they need. Those are the kind of things we have to look at to make sure we have that workforce here in the state of Michigan.
Okay, so I don't have to tell you two that we are living in contentious times, stark disagreements. Also, everybody remembers the now famous picture of Gretchen Whitmer holding the folder up while she was standing in the Oval Office. Going through this process, what did you learn about people with stark disagreements, partisan disagreements, Democrats versus Republicans, but also, progressives and hyper-conservatives versus centrists? What did you learn about working across the aisle, across ideological divisions to get something done?
Well, that's kind of what we try to do every day, in the legislature. And I know that that's not usually like the headlines that are in the news or the free press, but a lot of the stuff that we work on is bipartisan. But I would say, further, when you look at Michigan in presidential terms being a swing state, I think that helped to some degree as well. I know President Trump is term limited and can't run again, but I think looking at Michigan, and the fact that Speaker Hall and Governor Whitmer both went to the White House, because again we've been talking about this during the former Trump administration, during the Biden administration. I mean, it's been something that hasn't gotten as much traction, and then that White House visit, and I was pretty floored because we'd had a ton of conversations over the years where it was a lot less optimistic that it was ever going to happen. Obviously, we were trying to put our best foot forward with the runway project and all this kind of stuff. But, sometimes you can do the best and still not get it done. So I think, and as it is, as you notice, they had to add to the, the budget, to the appropriation to get those other 21 fighters, that wasn't really in the plan, and so
you had to make the case for more spending.
You had to make the case, you had to make the case for it, and but I think it's very strategic. It's very important, not just from a political standpoint, but from a defense standpoint as well.
One thing I would say is that this is a good lesson that not everything is partisan, right? I think we live in a place today where partisanship is at an all-time high. Sometimes we just have to be on Team Michigan and focus on one solid goal to get something done. And I think, the fact that this was able to happen in a bipartisan way shows that can still be done. It might take a little bit more work, but that's the role we're elected to do, is to sit down with people and solve problems, not play partisan games all the time. And that's something I really think we got to get back to. is finding ways to work together.
Okay, so in a sentence or two, someone comes up and says, we've got what we think is another great deal, but everybody is always angry at each other, especially heading into an election cycle. Starting with you, Senator Weber, what advice are you going to give?
Well, obviously you have to make the case for the project in specific, and then, you got to try the best you can to try to take the politics out of it. It's a little easier for Senator Hertel and I because we both come from competitive, 50-50 districts. We can't be too far one way or the other, but, it's trying to convince our colleagues that this is ultimately the best for Michigan. And again, in this Aerospace and Defense Caucus that we have, that's the nice thing. I mean, you've got a Democrat, Republican leading it. You have Republicans and Democrats in there, and we're working on projects together. We're working on, how do we do some of this stuff in the budget. And sometimes people are going out of their comfort zone a little bit, like on some of the tax credit stuff and this and that. But we're getting stuff done, so it's been good.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little bit like you're also making the case for a legislative problem solvers caucus, like what we have in Washington, D.C.
Sure. I support any effort for people to come together and get things done. I think to answer your initial question, my short answer is when Michigan succeeds, we all succeed. And so we need to put aside some of the, 10% of the stuff is what divides us the most. We really do agree on a good 90%, and we might not fully agree, but we can find common ground and find compromise on those things. We need to focus on that 90% before we focus on the 10%. I think too often today, we're focusing on that 10% first, and it doesn't benefit anybody in this room or anybody across the state.
Was there a moment where negotiations about something else became so fraught that it was getting in the way of this?
Not that I can remember. I mean, I've served in the minority, I've served in the majority in the legislature. You've got to find ways to sit down with people and just get things done. I think that's, if I have to go home every night, look my kids in the eyes and tell them that I did everything I could to move our state forward, and that's really what I try to do. I think you can find examples of that in the legislature, but that's really not what we're there for. We're there to find common ground and get things accomplished.
Well, even just, one of the probably the biggest thing that we voted on this session, and both of us worked on it in terms of the tip credit and the paid sick leave, and that was one of those where we were under some sort of deadline, and you don't necessarily see that early in the session with a quarter.
There were partisan
deadline.
Components to it.
But yeah, there was a lot to it, and able to kind of try to work together best we could, the folks that wanted to get something done on it, and we were able to do it. So.
Okay. Well, that is Senator Kevin Hertel, Democrat of Macomb County, and Senator Mike Weber, Republican of Oakland County. Thanks for coming and sharing your perspectives.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Rick, Senators, thank you so much for your time. Very informative. Thank you for your work, too. I know this has been a big lift and a big win for Michigan to get Selfridge up and running. Coming up next, we're going to have Representative Joe Aragona come in and talk about regulatory reform. As you know, Governor Whitmer has also embraced the idea of reforming our regulatory environment to make government better, not bigger. So we're looking forward to that conversation. As I mentioned earlier, there's a host of dignitaries who are walking up and down the parlor as we speak. Rumor has it that someone has seen Jared Goff. If I can get him to show up with me, I will bring him on stage. I don't know that Rick would be necessarily the best interviewer as a admitted not sports fan, but we will.
No, I'm a sports fan. I'm just not a sports expert.
Got it. Sports fan, not a sports expert. I'm also seeing a lot of folks who are walking around the parlor right now in their golf attire because, of course, we just finished up the annual golf tournament that we have here at the Chamber. It's put on by the Detroit Pistons and their friends. In fact, just scrolling through my phone right now, I saw a picture, a selfie I took with Isaiah Thomas here a few years ago at this very same event. So it's a fun event. It's a good light way to kick off the Mackinac Policy Conference, and of course we know that golf is where people can start building relationships.
Hey, how are you?
So with that, speaking of golf attire, This is live from Mackinac, presented by DTE Energy. And one of the most regulated industries in this state is energy, and our friends at DTE Energy. So I'm going to hand it over to Rick and State Representative Joe Aragona.
So, State Representative Joe Aragona, thanks for joining us here. We're going to be talking about regulatory reform, and the representative from Macomb County is the chair of the House Regulatory Reform Committee. Yep. So thanks for coming. And it's nice to talk to you in person. We do actually talk on the phone quite a bit.
We do. It's great to be here, Rick, and it's great to be up here on the island. And by the way, I am here representing Macomb Township, just so you know, that's what the MT is for. So.
Okay. Were you out on the golf course?
Yeah. It was it's absolutely beautiful up here. We got a lot of great courses throughout Michigan, and we definitely got a lot of great courses in Macomb County. So if you're ever on that side of the state, let me know. We'll go out, but it's a really beautiful course up here.
Okay. So when we look at regulatory reform, and I guess at least the House Republican regulatory reform strategy, what's at the top of your list?
So a number of things. So first of all, we want to take a look at how can we reduce regulation on a number of different businesses. One being housing, right? There's a little bit of an overburden on the housing industry, a lot of it coming from Eagle. So we want to see what we can do to kind of reduce.
The state's Environmental Regulation Department.
Correct. Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. So we want to see what we can do to kind of reduce that regulatory burden there. There's a number of other things that we kind of want to balance correctly that's coming into the 21st century. For instance, the tobacco industry. There's a lot of illegal products or products that probably shouldn't be on the market coming from China. So we want to right-size that. So there's a number of different things. Regulatory reform is such an all-encompassing type of subject. So there's a lot of different facets that we're going to take a look at over the next 2 years.
Can we talk about housing for just a second?
Sure.
Which is that I understand that you think that reducing regulations on housing will help spur development, and it's a very, very urgent need in Michigan and a lot of other places. But reducing regulation is a bit of a lagging incentive, that it doesn't create activity right away. On the housing side, what would you pair reducing regulation with to try and spur housing development?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, like you said, we do need to reduce the regulation, right?
I didn't say that. I just know that you said that.
Yeah. So for instance, there has this notion that's been out there that a lot of these housing units have to have their own separate, especially even single housing units, have to have their own like sprinkler system. That's been dancing around out there, and that's been something that we need to make sure that we don't instill in our building code, right? It's those extraneous, those overburdensome things that we need to make sure aren't in the housing code, and some of them that have even slipped through that we need to make sure that we eliminate, because every time you add one of those, that's adding dollars. And the Home Builders Association guesses that roughly every $1,000 you add to a housing unit eliminates about $3,200 people that can actually attain that housing unit, right? So that's the math on that. That's the rough math on that. Now, your question was, you got to reduce regulation. Now, what else can you pair that with? The pairing is these developers need to be able to make the math work that they can make money on these developments. Sometimes when they're going in and making a development, they'll take a look at maybe like the taxes, or they'll think like a length of time on a development is going to take a year or two, and then all of a sudden, they're going through a process with Eagle, or maybe even with the local municipality, and that 2 years turns into 4 years, turns into 6 years. Well, that's a larger amount of time that they need to sit on that property, costing them money, or going to court, costing them even more money, putting them further behind the 8 ball and making those costs higher on that development, right? So, if a developer can say, this is definitely going to take 2 years, this is definitely the cost, they can make the math work, they understand exactly what that cost is going to be, and they know, yes, I can make money, or no, I can't, so I have to abandon this project. But when they take a look at a project and there's an unknown, well, now there's just this huge risk, that's where they start to get shaky, and that's where they don't know whether they should actually be taking that risk or not. We need to make it a lot more clear to them, yes, this is what you can do, or no, this is what you can't do. Once you define what you can and can't do with these developers, let them go and make money. They'll figure out how to put these housing developments on the market.
So you want some more cemented regulations?
I want, no, it's not regulations. I want to reduce the regulations, and then I want to cement what they can and can't do for certain things.
What's an example of something like that where there's a variable?
Sure. Local taxing structure can be kind of a hard one to get around. Sometimes the math can be a little weird for some of these developers. I've heard of even developers who they decide to go put in like a PUD, a plan unit development. Well, all of a sudden the local municipality is asking for solar panels, or they're asking for the housing development not to have any type of gas power within the housing unit. Well, you got to have that for a furnace. You can't not have a gas furnace within Michigan. I mean, that's just not going to work with our winters, right? So those are the types of things that you just can't ask for within a municipality. So you kind of got to hamper what you can and can't ask for when you're doing a deal such as like a PUD, something like that. Taxes, that's another issue. There's a variety of those different types of things that we're tackling, and we're going to try and bring a housing package forward in the fall.
Oh, that's interesting. Are you saying that there should be more state preemption of some local regulations?
I think they just need to be better defined. I think that's what we're going to start taking a look at.
Okay. I want to talk to you about, you are one of, I think, the co-founding members of the Legislative Cryptocurrency Caucus.
Yeah.
And you want Michigan to be a leader in that area of the economy.
Yeah, well, it's an emerging field, right? So, should we be able to invest in cryptocurrency? Should the state be able to invest in cryptocurrency as part of one of its assets? If it does, how safe should it be? How unsafe can it be? Those are the types of questions that I think we need to come together sooner rather than later. That's one of those things that we don't want to be late to the game. We want to be early to the game, define exactly what our strategy is when it comes to cryptocurrency, and put it in law and move forward from there.
What does the state gain by being an early regulator or deregulator of cryptocurrency?
Well, obviously we can gain a lot of market share if we have that asset, right? The downside is it too risky? And that's what we basically, that's really in short what we need to take a look at and better define what we're going to do as a state.
So are you, I hear you talking about the state, and I assume that you mean like state pension funds and things like that, investing possibly in crypto. Are you also talking about it as a share of the state's economy? I assume that would be in the financial services sector? Yeah,
where it would be there. And then also what, I think there's a number of my colleagues that want to take a look at it and say, all right, what is our, rights as citizens to invest or not invest, and just define it. Not that that's ever really been a threat, but just to define it, that just in case anything were to happen in the future, that people have the right to own cryptocurrency.
Well, I guess what sort of occurrence are you thinking about, or is the caucus thinking about, that you have to guard against?
For that crypto Bill of Rights?
Yeah.
To be honest, that's not one of those, that particular idea hasn't really been a passion project of mine. That's been something that's come out as we've started to get together as a crypto caucus. But again, I do believe that if, for instance, Rick, if you want to go out and say, all right, I'm going to own this as either part of my retirement, as part of something I want to trade with, whatever that happens to be, you have the right to do that. I don't see an impact right now of saying, I don't see any threats to that happening, but you never know what can change, and if that's something that we want to instill and say that you have the right to do that, I see no problem with it.
What about protections for consumers who decide to buy or invest in crypto?
Exactly. So that's what that would be.
What would consumer protections in the crypto realm look like, obviously broadly speaking?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a variety of things we can look at there. There is some protections to some of the kind of like deep fakes, if you will. There's been a number of stories where grandkid calls grandma Grandma, I need money. You need to send me $2,500. Can you go down to this crypto machine and send me this money? And then all of a sudden they find out it's not actually the grandkid, right? So there's some things that we need to take a look at there to defend against people using this as a fast way to get away with dollars, right? So should you have the ability to own it? Yes. Should we also ensure that people aren't using this specifically to commit certain types of crimes? Also, yes.
Well, I mean, considering all the risks that you're laying out, that historically, one of the things that makes a nation, one of the first things that the United States did in order to turn the Articles of Confederation into a constitutional order was to adopt a common currency. So why are we going down this road when we've got a system that is supposed to offer the sorts of protections that you're talking about?
Again, I think this is more going to be an asset. I don't think this is going to go down the road of replacing our currency or any type of currency.
Right.
I think it's simply going to be, a different way of using our actual currencies. There's cryptocurrencies such as stable coins. Those are different types of things that banks are even developing in order to allow for faster transactions around the world, right? So those are even things that we need to start taking a look at as a state and even as a nation. But those are even some of the different things that we're going to start taking a look at.
I'm just quickly on that because I want to move on to a couple of other things.
Sure.
But and putting you on the hot seat here, it's no secret that the Trump family has its own crypto. Do you think that it would be that is something that politicians ought to stay out of while they're holding office?
Creating their own cryptocurrency?
And offering up investments like that.
Of their own?
Yeah.
I don't know enough to start my own cryptocurrency, so I can't tell you. I can't tell you why somebody would do that even in the first place. So that's not even something we're going down the road of as the Crypto Caucus. So.
But is it something that politicians holding office who have regulatory powers, should they stay out of this?
Yeah, Rick, I can talk to you about the asset portion. I can talk to you about the stable coins. I can talk to you more about the Bill of Rights. Yeah, about actually creating your own and using that as an asset. I just don't know anything about that. I'm sorry.
Okay. In the few minutes that we have left, I would like to talk about insurance and regulatory fraud, because that's something that you've also been active in, which is insurance affordability. What path would you like to see the state take to make insurance more affordable?
In what type of insurance?
Oh, I'm sorry. So auto insurance.
Oh, so I think that's something that the state has done a lot of work on. Obviously, we've done some auto insurance reforms. I think there's even some work that we still can take a look at there regarding some of the different codes for some of the different auto no faults. Some of the auto no fault type of healthcare, right? Because there's certain codes that didn't match up. So there's still stuff that we can take a look at to ensure that people are covered. Ensure people are insured while still keeping lower rates.
Yeah,
right.
Because we had the rate, we had the auto insurance reform, and it seems like rates are going back up again into that unaffordable realm.
Yeah.
And there are also still groups of people who aren't getting their injuries covered.
Right. So I think that's something that the insurance committee will be taking a look at over the next year and a half. From the regulatory side, I think what we'll end up taking a look at is more some of these tower issues. Tower, yes.
I mean towing companies.
Correct.
Okay.
So you have some of these towers that kind of show up on the side of the road. They aren't the tower that was called, and they end up towing your car, and then all of a sudden you have this issue where you're trying to get your car back, but hold on, that's not the tower that the insurance was covering, and that's not anybody that you called or the cops called. They just kind of showed up, and now all of a sudden they're holding your car for far more than what your insurance is going to cover, but they know that they have your car almost hostage, right? So they kind of found this regulatory loophole, if you will. So it's something that we're going to be taking a look at, actually with the Towers Association, because You'll often find that sometimes associations, such as like the Towers Association, they are very interested in cutting down and cracking down on their bad actors just as much as you are. So,
Representative Joe Aragona, thank you so much and sharing your perspectives on the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. So that's it for my portion of Live on Mackinac. Brad?
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Representative Aragona. Excellent job as always, Rick. As Rick mentioned, this is live from Mackinac. We are here at Grand Hotel, and this program is sponsored by DTE Energy. And we're very thankful for not only their support, but the supporters of this entire conference. It takes a lot of work to put on a conference like this. Our chairman is Peter Quigley from Kelly. Has been diligent in helping us set this agenda, but we really have a fantastic team at the Detroit Regional Chamber putting this on, led by our outgoing COO, Tammy Carnreich. Many of you watching this probably know Tammy. She's announced her retirement from the chamber, but not retirement from the workforce. And so we wish Tammy well as she moves on to the next phase in her life. Also, this conference is led by Wendy Nodge, who's our Senior Director of Signature Events. Wendy has been doing this for a very long time. And if you appreciate the work that's going on here at the conference, you appreciate Wendy Nodge. This portion of the conference is being streamed on DetroitChamber.com. We're also going to archive this footage. So if you saw something you like and want to share it with a friend or a colleague, please go back to the Chamber website and you will be able to find all this content and share it with your network. Further, the entire conference, our main stage sessions, are also going to be streamed on DetroitChamber.com as well as Detroit PBS. So make sure to check that out. We want this conference to be accessible to all Michiganders, not just the folks who are on site. So as Rick mentioned, he stepped off the stage so we could bring in a new moderator for the next 3 sessions. So I want to introduce you to Jerome Vaughn from WDET. Who is going to take on this next phase. We're moving on to the Senate Republicans. We're going to be represented right now by Senator Roger Victory, and we will be joined soon by Senator Jim Runstead, who not only is a member of the Senate, but the chair of the Michigan GOP. So again, this is Mackinac, or live from Mackinac, presented by DTE Energy. We're thankful for their support. And Jerome, please take it from here.
Me?
You.
I'm taking it from here?
You got it. You got the con.
I am so sorry for you.
Well, I think we're going to be outstanding today.
All right. I like that. Well, I'm going to be a little different. For me, as I think about this, Rick Pluta and a lot of the other folks are thinking about talking to the audience that is here in this room. I'm actually thinking about the folks who are back home watching or around the state. So I'm going to start in a very strange way. I want you to introduce yourself and tell me why you're wearing this hat.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm State Senator Roger Victory. I'm from the 31st District. That's on the west side of the state, including areas of Ottawa County and Allegan County. And one of the reasons wearing the hat is we just had tulip time and we had such bright, beautiful weather. I got a little sunburnt. So I thought, coming on the island, we're going to have some beautiful weather. And I thought, just being on the little safer side, wearing a hat. And also, today on the conference, we're talking about our trade relations. And this hat was presented to me last summer when I was up at Stampede by Premier Smith, Premier of Alberta. So part of our delegation, we were presented with a beautiful hat, and I thought, what a great opportunity to demonstrate our colleagues to the north, trade partners, and those issues too, as signifying that working relationship.
Well, let's start there. I wasn't going to start there, but let's start there. A lot is going on right now when it comes to trade and tariffs and concerns about that. Where is the Senate right now, the Senate Republicans, as far as thinking about how to make these tariffs work locally, how to enhance trade in Michigan?
Well, one thing is very vital that we still have in place that USMCA trade agreement. That USMCA trade agreement that I had an opportunity to be at the South Lawn of the White House for that signing. We worked on it at the state level, worked through a resolution on that component, and it's critical that that build that relationship. Now, as we go, we see at the President Trump at the federal level, there's some enhancements to this discussion, and it's as I have said, it's been a bumpy road. But eventually, as I'm a farmer too, so I get out there in that tractor, and it can be a little bumpy when I'm tilling those fields. But ultimately, we get to the final, you get that field level. We can be able to plant those seeds, and at the end of the day, have a pretty good harvest. But in the meantime, we've seen this has been a little on the little bumpy side, but I see great opportunities out in the future. And also, I think we're going to have some good discussion at this conference today, or this whole week on this process. And with that there, again, I think we just got to have that dialogue. And then we've been doing that as a legislative level with our friends in Ontario and our friends in Alberta. And I'll be heading to Saskatchewan here, I believe, in July too. So we'll be engaging.
Well, tell me a little bit about that. I mean, because I love this hat, but what are you looking to achieve when you go to Saskatchewan?
Well, with Saskatchewan, it'll be a conference, a CSG conference, Council of State Government of the Midwest. I was a former chair of that. We held a wonderful conference in Detroit. We brought in members from 4 Canadian provinces, 12 other states, and we had the wow factor because they came to Detroit. They had a preconceived narrative. And when they came in that city and saw the dynamic vitality, the economic rebirth, a safe community, that was remarked up and down. That was a hallmark of that conference, and always appreciate all the hard work we did, even across the aisle, bringing that forward. Then we went to Ohio last year, and now we're going to Saskatchewan, and we're really talking about good policy, but also a lot of things will be dealing with energy. We realize that a lot of the energy that we pump right into our cars, that gasoline, comes from that region of Canada, Saskatchewan and Alberta, especially also agricultural sector. Our potash, as a farmer, those things, that material also originate right there in Canada. So these are things as we move forward, how do we put that balance of trade there and have a fair trade aspects and making sure that, at the end of the day, we both can win.
So let me switch gears just a little bit. How was the drive up?
I had a beautiful drive up, but I tell you what, I also noticed a lot of damage to those trees. We heard about the ice storm that did occur, and I see a lot of hard work. I saw, thank goodness we had those road crews to do that cleanup, but brought back the challenges we had here. And that's what I think too is, under that crisis, there's some lessons we learned how to focus our emergency responses, and I think we can move the needle forward, and I see that working. Some aspects will help. MDOT can move forward their teams. Even the Michigan National Guard, they stepped up to the plate there too. So all these formats there, just seeing some of the scars of our forest after that quite a once in a 100-year event.
You went outside the roadbed. I want to talk a minute about the roadbed. What do you see needs to be done? I mean, roads has been something we've been talking about for decades and decades and decades. Each administration in the governor's office is looking at different ways to make an improvement. What do you see that where we are and what do we need to do?
Jerome, I'm pretty excited about it. I have been having conversation with my House partners on this issue. I've been studying this for quite some time. I serve on Transportation Committee from my days in the House and my years in the Senate. I look at those areas, especially let's focus on local roads. If you study local roads where some of the better condition of the local roads are at, you see that the county or those townships or municipalities, they themselves have putting investments into those roads. And they've been moving the needle. I have represent 2 different counties. They both invest into the roads with some local millages. I think a great opportunity is if we came as a state, align ourselves with our locals, and use a reward mechanism. If you want to invest in your local roads, then the state can come as a willing partner along with that aspect. And if we could come up with $500 million at the state level, incentivizing our locals with $500 million. That's $1 billion a year investment. Think of that after 10 years. We could change the narrative because that $1 billion investment after 10 years would be a $10 billion investment in our local roads. And that's just, as you know, rewarding those who do it right.
I'll ask the hard question then, which is that enough money to do all the things that need to get done?
Jerome, that's $10 billion more than is currently in the system. Think of that. After a 10-year period of time, that's $10 billion. $10 billion in our local roads over a decade, that can start changing, that can change the deal.
So the next question along that line is, what's it going to take to actually get that done? There's always a bit of a gulf between an idea and the compromise to get it done and then implementation.
Well, one is, I think, let's bring it forward to those areas that have been doing it right. And sometimes I think when we have areas that we've been knocking out of the park, let's emulate that using best practices. And when they're doing it right, let's give some reward to that. I think sometimes instead of just always, sometimes at state funding, we act like a fire department. We're always out there trying to put fires out. I think we need to get ahead of the fires and then just do fire prevention. And by laying this program I have been speaking of and reaching out on, I think this is a method that can pay serious dividends because it's not like reinventing wheel. The proof is in the pudding already.
Is it in the pudding?
Well, I tell you what, there's many different flavors of pudding there, Jerome. And I tell you what, my flavor at the end of the day is solid investment in the roads and utilizing our current funding mechanism and leveraging those that, good behavior should be rewarded.
So we've got another year and a little bit until the gubernatorial election. What do you and the Senate Republicans hope to get done in that period of time? What are you looking at getting done?
I think
realistically.
Okay, yeah. Well, one serious issue is rollback of some of this recently passed energy policy, because we are facing a new economy out there at this point in time. Just in my district, there's a lot of potential investment in data centers, and these data centers need reliable, economical, and dependable energy. And right now, I think we are going down the road of not a reliable, affordable, and dependable energy. I do believe, there's all forms need to be in place, but we forsake a lot of base load energy production capacity. And so, let alone, we see at the federal level, a lot of investments going to be coming into the Midwest for manufacturing. I mean, we have an economic road of opportunity here for reviving a lot of our manufacturing. But if we're going to bring that back in the Midwest, one of the key ingredients is reliable, dependable power.
What else is it going to take to get folks to relocate factories in Michigan? Other than, tariffs, the tariff policy is there to get those wheels greased, but what's it going to take for the state to do? Because we're not where we used to be.
That's right. Well, one aspect is also, having that educated workforce. But one thing is we should also, we have a current workforce that's very astute in the manufacturing sector. And that's why when I hear people want to locate in the state of Michigan and areas of the West, what draws you? And it is, one of the replies is that workforce you have here in the state of Michigan. And sometimes we take that for granted how proficient they are in manufacturing. But while that workforce exists, we need to continue to invest in that workforce, making sure that, because as you see artificial intelligence coming in play, all the robotic areas, we're going to need that manufacturing workforce to be able to learn these new areas of opportunity, all that technology. They need to be working hand in hand and take on that need, and while we have all their amenities going forward. So I think we have a golden era of opportunity here in the Midwest, specifically in the state of Michigan, but we need to make sure we have that aligned and continue to invest. And I think I saw some new releases from Washington, D.C., how they want to invest additional in the trades, because they see that economic opportunity in manufacturing coming to the Midwest. And I'm glad to see from Washington, D.C., that investment opportunity they have announced, I think even today, about investing in the skilled trades. I think, boy, if we can align ourselves with Washington, D.C., we can align ourselves with Lansing, and along with our private sector, the opportunity, Jerome, is just huge for us in the Midwest.
So let me ask, you mentioned education. Are we doing enough to educate that next generation of workforce? That's something I keep in mind. I've got kids, my neighbors have kids. Are we doing enough to make sure they're ready to deal with the robots and computers and AI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
We need to do more. I'll just go right back to my district. We have a career line tech center. Fantastic facility. You know the problem, Jerome? It's so good that there's a waiting list for students. There should be no waiting list for those students that want to enter that career line tech center. But the key is too, we got not just the students. We need also amp up our instructors, because the instructors to educate these students, that's a competitive field too. So if you're going to teach the building trades, well, are you going to be an instructor, or are you going to be in the private sector? So we've got to create an environment that's conducive for those instructors that enter into that line along right with the students. And it's not just about wages at times, it's just creating that environment that they're appreciated, have a fulfilling opportunity for the students and the instructors.
All right. Thank you so much,
Well, Jerome,
Roger
it's been a
Vickery.
privilege.
Great to talk to you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
I think the opportunity for Michigan is just amazing, and we're continuing working hard in the Senate to make it happen.
All right. Thank you.
Senator Jerome, thank you for that informative conversation. We certainly appreciate everything that you're doing, Senator, to advance the interests of Michiganders, not just the people in your district, but the people across the state. We're going to move on to our next conversation, or start our next conversation here shortly. We're moving the topic over to economic development. First, we're going to have Trevor Lauer from our sponsor, DTE Energy, as well as the CEO of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Quentin Messer. But while we're waiting for them to get their microphones arranged, let me tell you a little bit about what is coming up here at the Mackinac Policy Conference, and we'll be talking about this on Mackinac Live, sponsored by DTE Energy, throughout the course of the week. One of the things I'm most excited about on Thursday afternoon, we are going to have a debate of the leading candidates for mayor of Detroit. We're all sad to see Mayor Duggan leave the office, but we have to pick a new mayor, and we're going to have 5 candidates here, including Council President Mary Sheffield, Pastor Solomon Kinlock, Council Member Fred Durhall, former Council President Santil Jenkins, and former Chief James Craig. So that is not just for conference attendees. Again, like everything else here at the conference, that's going to be streamed on DetroitChamber.com as well as Detroit PBS. So look forward to that conversation on Thursday. So with that, Jerome, Trevor, and Quentin have already started their conversation about economic development. So we're going to throw the camera to you guys so we can all be privy to it. So thank you all for being here.
Okay, thank you very much. So with me, we have Trevor Lauer from DTE Energy and Quentin Messer from the MEDC. We were just sort of strategizing a game plan for what we're going to be talking about. And I'm going to mess up the game plan right away, all right? Because on my way up today, I was listening to the radio. I do that from time to time. And there's this effort to get Consumers Energy to keep a coal-fired power plant open. So since you're here, I just wanted to ask you about that really quickly, what you think about that, how you react to that. I know it's not you, but how do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll give a couple things. First, it's a great question for Garrick from Consumers Energy.
I know.
So I got to start there. Look, we don't know where it'll end. We've heard the president say that they want to try to keep coal-fired power plants open. At DTE, we still run 1 coal-fired power plant. It has 4 units. We've committed to shutting 2 of those units down in 2028 and 2 of those units down in 2032, and that's still our plan right now.
Okay, so I take it then, and I won't linger here, but you're not worried about energy production for this summer?
No, I'm not worried about energy production for this summer. But one of the topics that we're going to talk about with Q is economic development. And with some of the big loads that want to come to Michigan, having power ready is one of the most important factors we have. So having base load power where you can serve these customers is going to be extremely important. And we see these large loads starting to migrate to states in the United States where they have large base load power plants operating.
Now, as someone who is up here and has questions on a piece of paper, I'm not really into the whole thing about data centers. I know that they take a lot of power. Why don't you run through for me, why do they take so much power? And then I'm going to come back to you and ask you about meeting those needs.
Well, at a very high level, I'm not going to get into the technology, but I will say maybe three things. The reason why data centers are so critically important, and I'm grateful for DTE's work on this, is because it's vitally important that we remain in the game in order to make sure that we have the most advanced technologies available to us in Michigan. The legislature and the governor signed it was data center legislation that was passed at the end of last session. I think the second topic that's very important, and I'll defer to Trevor to talk about this, is it's important to make sure that you have large power load users in order that are industrial users, commercial users, to make sure that you can provide a cross subsidy for the residential customers. So you can keep those residential rates as low as possible, because you have to have those power users to allow DTE to make the type of investments in infrastructure and maintenance that they need to make in order to provide the type of grid reliability. And I think the final topic is it's important to make sure that globally people understand that Michigan is a state that remains at the cutting edge of innovation. And I think as we look at federal industrial policy, that increasingly is focused on artificial intelligence, data centers, the use of data. We need to make sure that we are competitive that, because our federal tax dollars, the dollars we pay, are going to go into that, and we want to make sure that Michigan gets an outsized share of that.
Okay. So make it plain for me, how much additional energy do these data centers use, and what are you going to do to meet that need?
So 2 questions, let me unpack it. First,
would you unpack it for me, please?
I'll unpack it for
Thank you.
So the first question you ask is, how much power do they use? So I'll give an example. DTE, on the hottest day, our customers use around 11 gigawatts of power. Gigawatts a big term, that's a lot of power. An average data center complex is a gigawatt of power. So if you think about that in terms, one of these complexes is the size of 1/10 of our overall electric company load. Now, how do we serve the load, which is your second question? Well, there's a couple things that we have as an advantage at DTE. One, we're long power today, so we have excess power that we sell into different markets that our customers don't use every day. We also just built the last natural gas-fired power plant in the state, Blue Water Energy Center, and then we are actively building renewables and energy storage inside of the state today. So we have a really good way to serve the, I'm trying to think of the right word. We have a really good way to serve the customers. We just need to keep generating power, constructing more, but most importantly, we've got to work with Quentin and the team to attract the data centers to our state.
Well, you're doing my work for me. What do you have to do to attract those data centers other than say, we've got power that you need? What are you doing to entice them to come here and not to Indiana or Minnesota or the other places that they're going?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are 3 things we have to do. Is one, we need to make sure that we have sites, because one of the things that's critically important for data centers is speed to market. There is such a premium on the ability for them to get up and running, and so you need to have sites that are flat, boring. You already know to define wetlands or anything else that could complicate construction. That's one. 2, you need to have communities that want to have these type of projects in their community, because they are large. They take up prime real estate. Once you locate a data center, you're not going to be able to locate an advanced manufacturing facility or anything else on top of it. So we really have, working with DTE and others, really want to make sure that we have tailored solutions or make sure that we are developing community responsive plans. Because not every community wants a data center. Some people would rather have advanced manufacturing, so we want to make sure we optimize for each community. And I think the final thing is we need to make sure that we have the water and wastewater infrastructure that can also support the power. So in summary, we need to make sure that we understand holistically what's required for the site. In addition to power, you've got to have the land, and you also have to have water and wastewater. All those essentials that essentially allow it to be a plug and play in a very competitive environment.
So let me flip it for just a minute. Why wouldn't I want a data center if I wasn't all that interested in advanced manufacturing? I'm thinking of, you know, folks I know around the state. Why wouldn't I want a data center?
Well, I think that communities have their own character. And, you know, you have a lot of times these sites are on, you know, agricultural lands. And you may have communities that say, hey, look, we've been farming for 6, 7, 8 generations. And we want to keep this land agriculturally based. Some people may have questions about the aesthetic, or some people may think of other reasons for optimal use for that particular land. I think that what we have discovered, what I've learned over the last almost 4 years, is that we need to ensure, and I think we're doing that, that's part of the Make It in Michigan strategy, focus on cultivating people, revitalizing places, and competing for winning projects, is that that's going to look different across 83 counties on 2 of the most beautiful peninsulas in the world.
So I'm going to guess, given that you're here talking to me about this subject, that you like the idea of data centers coming to Michigan. Why is that?
Well, first I want to go back to what Q said, because I thought he knocked it out of the park on his answer. Look, we can get data centers here, but we need communities that want to host the data centers. And that's not for everybody. The data centers also, there's table stakes, right? We had to have the sales and use tax legislation. The legislature and the governor did a great job getting that done. The second thing you have to have is power. We have that at DTE. The third is you need sites that run underneath transmission lines. So we work really closely with our partners from ITC Transmission that are here also on siting those. So why is it good for the state? I'd say there's 3 reasons why it's good for the state. First, high energy users use a lot of our power, and they take the costs and they lower it for everybody else. So if you want lower utility bills, what a great way to do it with a lot of big energy users like data centers. Secondly, they pay a lot of taxes in the local community still. So it's a great opportunity for the local communities to capture taxes and to improve the services that they give back to the people that live in those communities. And third, I think it's really important that we stay on the high-tech end of AI. Like, AI is really going to drive a lot of the industry going forward. I don't think it's something that Michigan can't have any AI inside of Michigan. We've got big clusters happening in Ohio, big clusters happening in Illinois. We should be able to pull some of that here. But we've got to have willing communities, we've got to be long on power, and we've got to make sure that the state welcomes data centers in.
All right, so just 2 more questions. We've got about 4 minutes left, and I want you guys to go to your heart's content on this. Power aside, I know that's your thing. Are we ready? Do we have what we need to entice these data centers to come here? I mean, I'm presuming we've got certain communities that say, yeah, we want that, but you know, do we have the educated workforce? What are other things that we might not have that we need to do this?
You know, I'll take this and I'll obviously let Trevor have the final word. I feel very confident in Michigan's competitive position in order to attract and retain and develop a data center infrastructure. We have, sophisticated, public utilities. We have a public service commission that I think is working very creatively to make sure that the regulatory environment exists. We also have a set of communities that have said and raised their hands and says, hey, we would like to have these type of data center opportunities. We have legislation, as Trevor mentioned, passed on the use of the sales and use tax. We have very sophisticated construction companies that can really construct these data centers in a very timely way. So I think the atmospherics the environment is right for Michigan. I think the question is making sure that our willingness, our openness aligns with where companies are going to deploy resources. And then obviously, Trevor will work with his, other executives at DT to make sure that the power needs and power loads are satisfied. But I'm very confident in our overall competitive position.
All right, so because I'm a journalist, I think about a little bit of negativity here and there. Are there concerns that you have about something not going in a straight line, something unexpected happening to derail where you both are right now as far as bringing this to Michigan?
Attracting data centers is it's a competition like any other economic development prospect. So we're one of 17 states that have sales and use tax exemptions. So if you think about it, they can go to any of those 17 states. Attracting that first one to come to Michigan so that they understand how it'll be when they get here, what's the regulation, what's it like working with Eagle, what support will they get with you fill in the agency, making sure that they can get the zoning changes they need to make. Most of this will be agricultural to industrial land, and you're talking about 500 to 1,000 acres a shot. There's not going to be a lot of these big campuses, but we've got to get the first one here. These are the richest companies in the history of the world. They don't need incentives like other companies, so they're not asking the state to give them a large incentive package. What they're asking Michigan to do is, one, make sure you have power, and two, help us do the zoning and the siting we need to do when we get there. That's really their ask. I see no reason why we can't be successful.
1 minute left. Environmental concerns? Because they also use a good deal of water.
Yeah, an average golf course uses more water than a data center does. There's a lot of hype around data centers. What I'd tell everybody is take a step back, understand the facts. The facts are, you don't really know what they look like. They don't use a lot of water. They're going to put a bunch of trees up so you don't really see it anyways from the road. All they're going to do is produce a lot of taxes for your community, and they're going to provide a lot of jobs for people. We've got great skilled labor here in Michigan that can build these campuses for them. I just see it as a win-win-win for everybody.
All right. Trevor Lauer, Quentin Messer, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Nice job.
All right.
Thank you.
Q, as always, bud.
Yeah, thank you, my friend.
As always.
Well, Quentin and Trevor, thank you for that great conversation. Trevor, thank you especially and DTE Energy for sponsoring Live from Mackinac and giving us the opportunity to put together this great programming. As I've been sitting here looking out the window, I saw 3 ferries crossing the straits on their way to Mackinac Island, and that can only mean that more and more dignitaries, business leaders, elected officials, folks from philanthropy and the media are on their way here. The parlor here at Grand Hotel is filling up quickly with lots of folks who are interested in having the kind of networking opportunity that only can be provided by the Mackinac Policy Conference. So we're providing as much content as we possibly can to folks who are back home, whether you live in Detroit, Flint, Grand Rapids, Battle Creek, Marquette. If you go to DetroitChamber.com or Detroit PBS, you can see all of our main stage content streaming. If you're watching me, of course, you know that we can get you all this information from Live from Mackinac presented by DTE via the Detroit Chamber website. So please keep watching. We are going to keep this program going throughout the course of the week, and we're really excited to be able to provide this to you, our members, and the residents of our great state. So we're going to move on to another conversation, same subject area, economic development. I want to welcome Senator John DeMoose, who actually represents Mackinac Island, as well as Senator Mallory McMorrow from Oakland County. They have been working together closely over the course of the last session to put together a package of bills that will provide guidelines for how Michiganders are going to get their economic development strategy going in the future. So, Jerome, senators, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you both very much. I don't want to talk about economic development. I want to talk about the weather. And so, So let's jump, right in. First of all, from each of you, tell me, do you think the state is on the right track when it comes to economic development?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think we need to be working hard on economic development. I think we've lost our way a little bit. On both sides of the aisle seem to have different concerns about economic development, but both of them have concerns. On the one side, I think Senator McMorrow can speak to the Democratic side, but I've heard a lot of things that really concern me on the Republican side about calling anything we happen to do corporate welfare or these type of things. When, in fact, Michigan has a problem around the country with a perception problem, and we're going to have to spend some money to bring some of these corporations back to Michigan.
What sorts of things are you hearing perception-wise? What misconceptions are out there?
Well, I'll tell you what, I ran a business for 25 years, headquartered here in Michigan, but most of our clients were always in the Washington, D.C. area or Florida or different parts of the country. And I can tell you that almost everywhere I went, they'd see me wearing my Detroit Tigers cap and say, "What are you doing in Michigan?" They've watched for decades about the old Rust Belt state and our supposedly dying automobile industry, which is thriving, by the way. But they see that, they see us, they see crime statistics and news stories and all these headlines that have turned them away from Michigan, and they don't really understand what an incredible place it is to live. And then we've had, sadly, a bad corporate tax income structure for years and years and years that drove companies out. We've had a lot of laws that made it hard for businesses to do their operations here in Michigan. We need to overcome that.
What's it going to take to do that? And I'm going to ask you the same questions, but what is it going to take to get that straightened out?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it goes down to a package that Senator McMorrow and I are working together on, which is developing a 10-year economic development plan. Because nothing is going to work if everything we do is a bunch of one-offs. And we both serve on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and I got to tell you that I get tired of people coming in and we got this project, we got this project, we got this project, and there's no seeming strategy, there's no stick-to-itiveness. I was in the film industry and I saw what happens when there's not a long-term vision. Because in 2008, that time frame, we started our film incentives. Georgia had film incentives that they remodeled to follow Michigan. And I'm not even arguing in favor or against film incentives, forget what it is. But you knew darn well there was no commitment within the state of Michigan to stick with these things. There was talk the day they came out that they were going to be reversed. So it bred in the industry this mindset of get in, get your money, and get out. Georgia stuck with it. And today, Georgia is one of the best places on earth to produce films and television. And we want to come up, I don't think it's films, but whatever the industry is, we need to come together, coalesce around a plan that we stick to as a state.
What's this word, plan? Well, explain that word to me.
A plan. It is, what a concept, right? Having a plan. Michigan is a state that I think as we look at the economic development strategies, and I say strategies plural because it feels like it changes with every administration, whether it's automotive or, autonomous vehicles or investing in the film incentives that we then took away, there isn't any consistency. And what has happened is we've allowed ourselves as a state to be lapped by many other states who have stopped the rat race of going after every single project, competing with every single state, overpaying for projects that may or may not make sense for your unique state. So what we're proposing in a comprehensive 10-year plan is exactly that. It's answering the question, who do we want to be when we grow up? We had Doug Song, who was the founder of Duo Securities, in front of my committee a couple of years ago, and he said something that sticks with me. He says, Michigan has a really good understanding of what we've done. We have a hard time imagining or getting comfortable with what's next. So we're scrambling to try to figure that out at the expense of taking the time to assess who are we, what is our unique advantage versus other states, what are our core competencies, what are our assets, what do our residents want to do that is going to lead to a place where they have careers that they can thrive in and that is going to make Michigan be prosperous. In the 1980s, 5 of the top 10 metro regions in the entire country for median household income were Michigan. Today, none of the top 10 are. And if we do not center economic development with a plan that is solely focused on increasing prosperity for residents, we're going to keep falling behind.
So let me ask, you look at states that are on the top of the economic development list, Utah, Washington. What do they have that we don't have?
So something that both of those states have done that I think is a really unique approach that's really only happened over the last 10, 20 years is understanding that we have to flip the issue on its head. Previously, talent would go to where the jobs are. These days, with a younger generation, jobs are going to where talent is, and they're paying a premium to do so. So you look at both of the states that you mentioned, they are really focused on investing in something that we've considered in some of the economic development reform we've tried to do, which is not only just jobs, but it's place, it's transportation, it's investing in walkable downtowns, access to housing. Those are the types of things that attract talent, where talent is going to locate in a state where they know, particularly as a millennial, younger generations, we don't have the same job security that our parents did. So you want to know that if you take a job and for whatever reason that job goes away, you get laid off, they downsize, that you have another 3, 4, 5 career opportunities, and you're not going to be left stranded in case something happens.
So the two of you are working together on this. The state, in your minds, needs this sort of cooperation. How did you manage to get together on this? Because, you know, there's so much partisanship going on so many different issues. Is the situation so critical, so dire in Michigan that was the only way that the two of you got together on it? Or do you see common threads? Did you see common threads?
Well, I think there's absolutely common threads. You know, we don't need to be at each other's throats all the time. And the fact is, there's maybe 5 or 6 issues that are really divisive. But I think responsible legislators who want to do actually good things for the state can come together around important things. I'm sure, I don't know what drove Senator McMorrow into this, but I think it was similar, that we just saw there's no rhyme or reason to this stuff. And we watch a state that swings back and forth. You know, I'll tell you what, one thing that really sealed the deal is I supported this Ford Motor Company battery plant. And I've told people this before, that, you know, people have questions about electric vehicles or whatever. I've told people they could have been making fairy dust, and I would have supported that plant because this is our hometown team, and I'm sick of watching them relocate to other parts of the country. And you know what they said to me afterwards, and I don't know if this is still true, I probably shouldn't even be attributing it to them, but they said, John, you know, if we didn't get this program, we're never building anything in the state of Michigan again. And I said, why? I mean, that's scary to hear as a state legislator. I said, because you swing back and forth, every new administration. We never know if you're going to love us or if you're going to hate us. And you swing back and forth. We go to places like Tennessee, and they're thrilled to have us there. They want the jobs we provide. They roll out the red carpet and do everything they can to keep us there. And that's what drove me to do it. And then when I saw that Senator McMorrow had a heart for this, and we both started talking, and I realized also that we don't know who we are as a state anymore. I mean, I grew up here, and in the 80s, and before that, everybody knew what Michigan was. We made great things, and we played outside all year long. That, like, anybody could point to that. That's what Michigan is. We really don't have that long-term vision right now of what are we? Are we still a great manufacturing state? Do we want to be that, or do we want to go to just the knowledge economy, or do we want to think we can be the next Silicon Valley, which the world doesn't really need another Silicon Valley? But we realize, at least for me, and I think it was similar with Senator McMorrow, was we saw this disjointed approach to things, saw the risks to our corporations, and said, we've got to do something to act. And now, I have no doubt that the two of us would probably have a radically different, or at least a different view of what that economy should look like, but we're in unison that we need to have a plan.
But I think John points to an important point in that there were some shared frustrations. You know, when we would take votes in the Appropriations Committee to transfer taxpayer dollars to some of these projects, and then we look at some of the headlines that show that we're spending millions, billions of dollars on economic development, and yet our median household income is declining, that our population has stagnated, that we have more residents getting set to retire than we have younger workers coming into the workforce. I know when we were up in northern Michigan, at that panel, you pointed out, yeah, a lot of people up here think this is just a tourism destination. And for younger people, what is the reason to stay and start a career and buy a house and start a family? There were shared frustrations. And I think what's really thoughtful about our legislation is we know we would likely come to different solutions, which is why we wrote legislation that says it's not on us. We are going to create a panel that exists for 1 year with experts from regions all across the state, from education, from economic development, entrepreneurship, small business ownership, manufacturing, to say this is on you. you guys write a plan that we will then use in the legislature as our North Star. Because when I talk to colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I think the frustration is most legislators understand we need to be pushing economic development. There are some on both sides of the aisle who just think economic development should never be done. But for the rest of us, we just want to know why. What is the direction? What is the rationale? What is the strategy? What's the plan so that we can feel good as the stewards of taxpayer dollars that we're spending them wisely?
What are some of the things that, the panel is going to look at, think about how to figure out what that North Star is? I mean, you sort of mentioned, introspection and what communities want. What's it going to take to just figure out what that North Star should be?
So we held a series of roundtable discussions all across the state. We started in Traverse City, we held another one in Detroit, and we held a third one in the Holland area to bring together kind of the first draft of who these individuals would be, to just have the conversation. And we heard a few things loud and clear. Number one, that people across the state look at the results of the Growing Michigan Together Council report and agree that population growth, household income growth, and entrepreneurship should be anchors for each region, but that how you get there is the question that hasn't been answered, and that is going to look very different in northern Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula, in the Thumb, in southeast Michigan, and west Michigan. So we need a plan that has flexibility to get there. We also know that we have to center prosperity as the metric for success. Jobs created is an outdated metric. We have more job openings in Michigan than we have people to fill them right now. So if you're not actually improving people's lives, are you succeeding? So starting from that framework, I think giving this group of people the task of sort of answering that question of, okay, how do we get there? That we can then use as a tool, not only to understand what projects to say yes to, but probably more importantly, what ones to say no to, so that you can really hone in on who do we want to be when we grow up, how are we supporting Michigan and Michiganders in a thoughtful way.
So are you sending spies to Utah to get intel? What?
You kind of are, aren't you?
Yeah. So my legislative director went on a tour to a number of different states with some economic development leaders from Michigan to do exactly that, to figure out what are other states doing right, what are they doing wrong, what can we learn from. And I think a really good example, not for us to model their plan, but I look at a state like Virginia. Virginia, under Governor McAuliffe years ago, understood that there was frustrations with economic development and there was a legislative push for reform that is now being executed under Governor Youngkin. And for a state like Michigan, when we talk about the inconsistencies, we are one of few states that it is very likely that the control of power will change from one administration to the other. We have to prepare to have a plan that withstands political changes. And I think Virginia is a really smart state to learn from.
Yeah, and the only way you get there, too, we've built into this a really localized feature here. I mean, because we are really multiple states within one state. We're all impacted by certain things, but we have unique dynamics. For instance, up here in northern Michigan, here in my district right now, one of the top driving forces for me and for everybody up here is how do we create a year-round economy so that our kids don't all grow up and leave us, because we miss our kids, frankly. And, that involves, we love tourism. We're glad tourism's here. It's a huge part of our economy, but this means getting into things like small to medium-sized manufacturing, which is perfect. We've got great shipping with our access to the lakes. That's appropriate. How do we leverage things like the great universities we have down at University of Michigan and Michigan State and all these great universities? Maybe that's a certain different part of our economy. Where's our skill set in Detroit? And so I think that's part of what we have to do is make it customized. You can learn from other states as to the types of things that have worked, but we really need to hone into those regional differences and make sure we have something that works for everybody.
We don't have the North Star yet, but no doubt whatever it is, technology is going to be playing a role in it here or there. What more do we need to do on the education front to make sure that your kids, my kids, are ready for those jobs?
Well, that's a big one, which we talk about all the time. And I think the policy is starting to catch up a little bit with more CTE education and these type of things. And this is something, 15 years ago, I had started an organization with a man from the Center for Automotive Research because he foresaw this giant cliff we were going to have in terms of manufacturing workforce. Whereas people considered this sort of dirty, dark, dangerous, dead-end jobs of before. They'd seen all the black and white images, and they don't realize what advanced manufacturing is. And we don't have the workforce, and yet we have this system where we just knee-jerk send all our kids to four-year colleges. I think that perception's changing. So this is an area with what you're talking about where I actually think we're going to start to see progress. There's great schools, there's great funding coming up for our community colleges with Michigan Reconnect and some of these other things. So we're not going to immediately see the difference, but this is certainly on everybody's radar. I think we're headed
also,
in the right direction.
This panel can really direct how do we rethink education and workforce development. There's a real silver lining in the state of Michigan on certified apprenticeships, where there are some really non-traditional apprenticeships in things like beekeeping, winemaking, agriculture, agritech, where I think for millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, the generation after that, there's more flexibility to be able to pivot your career if you get down a path and realize maybe the jobs aren't here. I mean, thinking about the advent of AI, and for a lot of white-collar workers, how quickly a lot of those jobs that we thought, software engineers, that was going to be your ticket to success. In 5-10 years, that may not be it anymore. So if you don't have to go back to school for another 4-year degree, maybe you could take on a certified apprenticeship and find out you love beekeeping, and that's your new career.
All right.
That's probably pretty smart.
But
we haven't spelled that out in the plan.
There's that one person who's going to find it and realize this is what I've been waiting for.
Valerie's got a whole paragraph in our bill about beekeeping. I always wondered why. So.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator John DeMoose.
Yeah, great to be with you.
Senator Melanie McMorrow, thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you more next couple days.
Yeah, thanks. Take care.
Well, Senators, Jerome, thank you for that outstanding conversation. We all know how critical economic development and a good plan for Michiganders is. I know, Jerome, we're only one 15-minute session away from sharing a big porch ale here on the porch of the Grand Hotel. So we look forward to a little hydration when this is all said and done. Next up, we're going to have two members of the Legislative Auto Caucus, Representative Joe Tate from Detroit and Representative Kurt Vanderwall from Ludington. I mentioned earlier the Auto Caucus is a program of MishAuto, which is a statewide automotive cluster association. In fact, they're having all separate programming here today for auto executives before we kick off the main stage programming. MishAuto created the Legislative Auto Caucus because they recognized that we had caucuses, Sportsman's Caucus, all sorts of caucuses. In fact, maybe even a cheese caucus. I haven't asked about that, but we didn't have one entity within the legislature that was solely focused on our signature industry. And I know you, Jerome, and Senator Morrow and Senator DeMoose spent some time talking about the importance of this strategic plan, including our auto industry. So we know how critical this is to our future, whether it's traditional automotive manufacturing of ICE vehicles or battery and electric powered vehicles, which are the wave of the future, so that we can not only compete with the Chinese who are invested in electric automotive, but we can beat them and continue to be the automotive capital of the world. So with that, Jerome, I'm going to kick it back to you for the last session of the afternoon and with Representative Tate and Representative Vanderwall.
Oh, how are you?
Very good.
So the two of you get to back clean up, and I'm just going to ask you some questions about these things called autos. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe not. First of all, let me just ask, a lot has been going on in the last, few months with, tariffs and reaction to tariffs. Let's open it up that way and we'll go downstream. Where are things with the auto industry right now from your perspectives?
Well, I think from my perspective, the auto industry, and when you look in particular at the state of Michigan, not only do we have this heritage of auto and manufacturing that has been here for over a century and has gone through a variety of evolutions over time. But, most recently, I think we're seeing, just I think some opportunities, I think, for us to figure out how to move forward. I think, when you talk about tariffs in particular, I think that has been a drag on the auto and creating more soft demand in terms of, automobiles. But I think, what we've been seeing just in terms of innovation from the state of Michigan, and also the willingness to move into new technologies, whether you're talking about EVs or other types of technologies that go into an automobile. I think Michigan is a place that we can be primed to continue to be a leader in automotive going forward.
Well, and where do you see us right now, auto-wise?
Well, number one, Michigan is the state that put people on four wheels. And I think it's extremely important we continue to push forward to make sure that Michigan is the leader when it comes to making sure that the auto industry and the people that work in the auto industry have the best opportunity. I think as we look at what the potential impact of what tariffs could be, we have to be open to what does that really look like in the long run when we're bringing these products back in to the state of Michigan, who it's employing, bringing in young families. And I think ultimately, it doesn't matter what party you belong to, we need to make sure that Michigan grows in population. We can't do that without the auto industry, and we need to make sure that all the affiliates that go into that same situation have the opportunity to grow also. So I look forward to what our horizon looks like. I think our future in the auto business is very, very bright, and it's not going to come without some bumps, but we were experiencing bumps over the last several years with a transition away from fossil fuel and that with the autos, and we're starting to see that people have spoken, and both of them are wanted, and I think that's good for the state of Michigan.
I want to ask just one more tariff-related question, and then we'll move off to some other things, innovation and other things like that. Are you talking in the legislature about the impact of the tariffs? Are you thinking about how to mitigate or enhance certain elements of tariffs? I would guess it's been difficult because it's sort of gone back and forth, and this level, but sort of legislatively, where are you with what's going on?
I think there have been a number of conversations around that, and when you look at the tariffs, I think what we're seeing too is how is that going to impact the budget? When we're talking about revenue sources for the state of Michigan, how are tariffs, when you look at how the state of Michigan does with trade, whether it's with our neighbors in Canada or other countries across the globe. So there have been conversations just around that, and I think really how is it going to impact the state budget, and then also when we look at job growth as well too. So I don't think there has been anything that we've all settled on and agreed on specifically in terms of what will be the next steps. But there certainly have been a lot of conversations directly and also indirectly, whether it's officially in committee hearings or throughout the budget appropriations process.
Okay.
And I would agree with Representative Tate on the importance of what we need to be discussing and what we need to look at. Right now, we still don't really know. I mean, one day you hear a tariff is here, the next day there's the negotiations and there's some changes. You have GM, which has really started to reinvest in the United States to bring more manufacturing back. All those pieces really become very important, but we have to really see where this whole thing washes out and what those tariffs will do. For us to spend a lot of time legislatively right now when it's an unknown, we can do more harm than we could do good. And I think it's extremely important that we're all paying attention, we're all working. I've had many conversations with the folks from GM and from Ford, and so we can be somewhat prepared. and they really don't know yet on what it's going to do to affect them. But ultimately, the number one goal is to make sure we keep the auto industry strong in the state of Michigan, the employees working, so that we can grow, and that economically will continue to make Michigan one of the best.
So let me ask you, what's it going to take to do that in your mind?
Well, in my mind, number one is we've got to work really hard as a legislative body to make sure that we put the tools in place. So we got to watch what we're going to put in lines of the business tax. We've got to make sure that we work on our taxes that incentivizes companies to make sure that they invest in the state of Michigan, because when they invest, that means more employees are here that invest in our economy, helps our small businesses, our restaurants, our schools, our education system. All those play a hand. So that ultimately comes down to is we've got to make sure they're strong, because they're one of our largest employers. If you take all the pieces and parts of the auto industry here in the state of Michigan, and sometimes we forget that. And when we do forget it, and Representative Tate and I have been around when we have forgotten, and when Michigan runs off, and we're always the first one to tell if the economy's softening, and we're one of the last to come back out. So we got to be ahead of the game.
Agreed, and I think as you mentioned with the tariffs, finding certainty around that, like what is that going to look like? Because I know companies have to be able to plan, they have to be able to allocate capital. I think from the state's perspective, we've been able to do a lot of things to support, I think, the business climate and setting up private industry for success. You know, we passed a R&D tax credit that was done on a bipartisan fashion. We also passed an innovation fund to spur like entrepreneurship, so those that have good ideas here in the state of Michigan can receive support from the state so they can grow and hopefully stay here in the state of Michigan as well too. Also funding for Going Pro, which is an apprenticeship program. I think we're up close to $50 million right now into that program. So being able to continue to allow our private industry to be able to use that to train and to grow their talent that they do have. I think it's, as Representative Vanderwall mentioned as well too, how are we also talking about, population growth as well too, and making sure that, we support that and we don't get in its way, because we still do need to figure out in terms of population-wise, how are we moving this state forward?
I was just talking a few minutes ago with Senator McMorrow and Senator DeMoose about economic development. You look at rankings, Utah, Washington are sort of up there at the top, generally not auto-related. What sorts of things do you see that Michigan should be doing right now to ensure that we stay competitive, remain competitive? You talked about competition, so that folks don't go to Tennessee or Ohio or other places as they are looking forward to the next generation of vehicle.
You want me to jump in first? Okay. And that's a great question. How does Michigan remain competitive? And I think very personally, as a small business owner, is that we need to make sure that we continue to give that small business the same tools as a large one. And we need to make sure that we're competitive on our tax rate. We need to make sure that what our employees are paying in lines of taxes, that we're working and we're very fair on that, so that those folks can remain there. I believe that if you look at this last contract that the big three signed, it's one of the strongest contracts that we've seen in the industry. So those people are looking towards the future. They're investing into the community. They're investing into the entire state, because if you look at where we touch in the auto industry and being part of the auto caucus, we're seeing contributors to the auto industry throughout the entire state. and we need to make sure that we allow them to grow. And I think right now we need to make sure that our tax rates and what we're charging businesses is very competitive, because it's very easy in today's world to be lured across state lines, and we can't allow that to happen.
And then also, just adding on to that, I think when we also look at, talent as well too, like, talent is able to migrate, I think, a little bit more freely, just in terms of how the economy is evolving. So you're seeing, I think, a lot of businesses, a lot of firms, and the state as well, thinking about where do people want to live. And I think that's where people are really starting to, see what that means. So also having those areas too where there's attainable housing, workforce housing that's available, that you have, the third place, as it's called, where do you go when you're not at work or you're not at home? So we've done a little bit of that with the revitalization and placemaking grants as well too. So I think the future is, as much as possible, how are we attracting talent, to the state, and what are those tools that we're using outside of, traditional economic development, classical economic development, which is incredibly important, like having a positive business climate, as well as, understanding what, our firms in the state of Michigan need, and attracting other firms as well too.
We've got about 2 minutes left, so this is probably the last question, but you were talking about talent, and in some of the other discussions I've had today, education is an important part of that, because, our generations aren't going to be making flying cars. However, our kids' generations will be making flying cars. What do we need to do to set them up to be able to do that, so that we have the talent here in Michigan to build those flying cars in, 20, 30, 40 years?
It's the Jetsons, isn't it? We're coming all the way around to the Jetsons.
I was going to say, how much time do we have? No, I think, that's going to be the million, billion, trillion-dollar question, is like, how are we increasing educational outcomes for our kids? I think there are going to be numerous, places that we need to go, whether it's, classroom size, which has been talked about, funding, which has been talked about, how long students are spending in classrooms, physical activity is another one, another place, aftercare. These are all pieces that have to be pointed in the same direction. But what I will say is, I think at the end of the day, we just need a plan. I think we all, as legislators, need to come together, agree on a 10-year plan on what we need to do to improve educational outcomes.
And I think I'll finish off real quick. And Representative, I have worked really hard when it comes to the education piece, the career trades, and we've worked really hard inside our K through 12 program to make sure that kids get an opportunity to experience what the trades are about. But I think the other piece of what we've seen so much that we've done with what we've tried to do in education is we have so many groups that are out there right now that, they're building the battle bots type thing, but they're building code. And that's technically where all these automobiles are going to be, is all how we write code. It's not I don't really know how code works. Maybe he does. But that's way above who I am. And we need to invest in our children to give them the opportunity in school to fall in love with it. And I think we've neglected that in years past. And now we're really seeing that we got to give them those tools. So if we invest in the education, give them the opportunity, we'll soar to the future.
All right, thank you, Representative Kurt Vander Wal, Representative Joe Tate. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
this afternoon.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
So Jerome and representatives, I don't mean to stand in front of you, but this is where the director told me to stand to close this thing out. Thank you everyone for joining us for Live from Mackinac, sponsored by DTE Energy. Thank you Jerome and our other moderators, Rick Pluta and Samantha Schreiber. Thank you both for being here and your colleagues. This has been great conversation. We look forward to doing it again tomorrow at 9:15. So if you're streaming this program, don't forget DetroitChamber.com. We'll be back at 9:15 with more great conversation. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.